Chapter 678. Li Fei coldly snorted, "Brat, I was thinking of sparing your life because you are a newcomer. I didn't expect that you would be so ungrateful. If that's the case, you should obediently accept your death." The commentator impatiently shouted, "If that's the case, then let's begin. In the end, who will obtain the final victory? Who will be the master of the peak? Let's begin." After shouting this sentence, the two of them looked at each other. The corners of divine sword Li Fei's mouth curled up into a smile. He slowly took a step forward and waved the sword in his hand. In an instant, the divine sword started to tremble. Li Fei was an expert of the fourth level of the human profound realm. His strength was on par with the thunder god. He closed his eyes and pointed his two fingers. The 8th grade artifact on the ground instantly flew up. The long sword danced and flew towards Ji Yu's direction. Good. Truly worthy of being a divine Shen expert. His sword control technique is simply godly. Everyone's face carried a trace of a smile. At this moment, Ji Yu slowly took a step forward and directly grabbed the long sword. However, Li Fei was an expert in sword control. He poured his spiritual energy into the long sword. At this moment, the long sword seemed to have received an order. Suddenly, the long sword turned its head in the air and flew forward like a long sword. Ji Yu's Kunpeng giant sword instantly went berserk. What a great artifact! Li Fei enviously looked at the Kunpeng giant sword in Ji Yu's hand. A trace of jealousy appeared in his heart. But so what? As long as I kill Ji Yu, that artifact will be mine. Thinking of this in his heart, he turned his body around. He directly walked in front of Ji Yu. Ji Yu indifferently said, "Shen skill, wind blade." After shouting these words, the gale continued to blow, and a gust of wind directly arrived in front of Ji Yu. Ji Yu's figure flashed, and he turned around, swinging his sword heavily. The long sword and the giant sword collided. A loud bang was heard. The two Shen Qi intertwined and retreated at the same time. The fierce wind blew in front of that guy. It seemed as if there were countless blades in the wind, scraping his skin. It was as if his skin and flesh were being directly shaved off. Hell's Valley was indeed worthy of its name. After suffering such a heavy injury, that guy could actually raise his head and lock his eyes on Ji Yu. "Brat, you really don't know what's good for you." After shouting these words, they charged towards Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu swung the giant Kunpeng sword in her hand towards his head. After sensing Ji Yu's hostility, the arm in his hand was already full of bones. He suddenly took a step back and locked his eyes on Ji Yu. Li Fei felt the heavy arrow in Ji Yu's hand and immediately looked in Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu took a step forward. At that instant, the 5 streams of power of succession gathered in the air. Ji Yu had long wanted to try how the 5 powers of inheritance merged together. Ding! The host has used the Shen skill, Rainbow Sunday. The 5 powers of Shen Qi merged together. After merging, they turned into nothingness. No one knew how Ji Yu created the Shen skill in her hand. At this moment, the Shen Qi gradually pressed down. In the blink of an eye, he turned his head. At this moment, he slowly raised his hand. At this moment, the Shen energy quickly gathered together and flew forward. The two Shen energies heavily intertwined together. After a loud rumbling sound was heard, the two Shen energies collided. Li Fei turned his head around. He took 2 steps forward and waved the divine sword in his hand again. He directly charged towards Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu only controlled the giant Kunpeng sword in her hand. A fire bird flew out once again and pounced onto the other party's body. At this moment, the two profound energies collided together, and a loud rumbling sound was heard. He took a step back. At this moment, he directly locked his gaze in front of Ji Yu. At this moment, the flesh on Li Fei's body was being devoured. He said indifferently, "You've already lost." After saying this, the two of them looked at each other. He said indifferently, "Shen skill, 10,000 feet divine sword." At this moment, the long sword quickly gathered together and turned into a treasure. They raised their heads at the same time and looked in the direction of Ji Yu. They took a deep breath. Presumably, when Ji Yu's sword fell, it would be accompanied by a loud boom. At this moment, the two Xian-Qi were intertwining. However, Li Fei's flesh was devoured by the firebird and he had no way to resist. He slowly took a step back. Blood flowed out from the corner of his eyes. After seeing so much blood, Ji Yu took 2 steps forward and kicked him heavily. After receiving this kick, he instantly fell to the ground. Li Fei collapsed in a pool of blood. Everyone who was watching the battle revealed a trace of surprise on their faces. The shoutcaster was even more stunned. This is impossible, impossible. The divine sword Li Fei actually died at the hands of the newcomer Ji Yu. After they shouted this, everyone had forgotten who the divine sword Li Fei was. They only remembered that Ji Yu showed her invincible power and killed him. Sky Snake looked in the direction of Ji Yu. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. There was only one battle every day. Ji Yu took 2 steps forward and entered the capital city. A few people looked in the direction of Ji Yu. A battle could break out at any time in this place. When they saw Ji Yu coming, they drew out their swords and charged in the direction of Ji Yu. The situation in front of Ji Yu was changing rapidly. He flew up and saw a blood-red face in front of him. You have 1 point just now. As long as we get his point, we can exchange it for a cup of Fountain of Youth. Kill. A few people rushed in the direction of Ji Yu. Ji Yu merely raised his hand, and the power of thunder and lightning was suddenly released. Ding, the host used Thunder Snake. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Lightning snakes and the like instantly coiled around their bodies and gradually tightened around them. They could feel the binding power on their bodies becoming smaller and smaller. Furthermore, they also carried the power of lightning. Chapter 679. They sensed the power of thunder and lightning on Ji Yu's body. Their eyes showed a trace of vigilance. They looked at Ji Yu's body, as if there was a slow power burning their skin. They felt the flames engulfing their bodies. For the first time, they felt fear in their hearts. It was not the first time they felt the feeling of death, but it was like the feeling of being tortured to death. They felt a trace of fear in their hearts. Thinking of this, Ji Yu slowly took a step in the other direction. At this moment, they did not turn their heads. Run. After shouting this, they turned their heads and ran in the other direction. Ji Yu ran a few steps. There was a trace of a smile on the corner of her mouth. Countless thunderbolts fell at this moment. Accompanied by the sound of the explosion, they fell into a pool of blood one after another. Ji Yu led the crowd to kill in their direction. After seeing Ji Yu, they turned their heads and said to Ji Yu in front of them, "We were wrong. Please don't kill us." Ji Yu did not listen to their pleas. She just waved the long sword in her hand and killed them directly. A few men in short sleeves walked out of a building and buried all those people. The old man walked out of the room. After seeing Ji Yu, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm the innkeeper of the land of slaughter." After saying this, he stretched out his hand. Ji Yu took out a piece of dark stone and handed it to him. After returning to the room, Ji Yu crossed her legs. She felt the dark force in her body solidifying in her dantian. She slowly stood up. At this moment, the power of the sky-splitting sword was flying continuously. At this moment, she was constantly forging something. She opened her eyes and stood up. She looked at the water droplets in the basin in front of her. Ji Yu knew that several hours had passed. Ji Yu stood up. She picked up the huge sword of Kuan Peng and walked out of the room. At this moment, a bolt of lightning kept coming. When the power of lightning came out, with a flash of his figure, he disappeared from where he was and slowly took a step forward. At this moment, they raised their heads and looked in the direction of Ji Yu. They said at the same time, "It's Ji Yu." After saying this, they fixed their eyes on Ji Yu. Ji Yu slowly took a step forward. The people in the duel arena naturally knew that Ji Yu had defeated Divine Sword Li Fei the day before. However, this was not the most impressive. After the duel, he had been ambushed. Despite being ambushed, he had still managed to kill so many people. After thinking of this, they fixed their eyes on Ji Yu. Ji Yu said slowly, "I'm here to sign up today." After hearing this, the two people looked at each other and whispered in Ji Yu's ear, "Ji Yu, child Ji Yu, We all bet a lot on you. The corners of everyone's mouth curled up into a smile. After seeing this smile, Ji-Yu's figure suddenly disappeared in front of them. The commentator stood on the arena again. At this time, 7 or 8 matches had ended, but only a few people were lucky enough to survive. The commentator continued, "Next is the most exciting match of today." At this time, 2 people walked out from the side. They slowly raised their heads and showed a smile at the corners of their mouths. These 2 people are known as the Iron Wind duo. At this time, they raised their heads and showed a smile on their faces. They brandished 2 precious weapons. Wind howling hammer. The 2 people were smiling proudly. The commentator said, "Logically speaking, it's a 2 versus 2 battle. But today, we're fighting a 2 versus 1 battle. Let's welcome the newcomer who created a legend, Ji-Yu." Ji-Yu slowly walked out from another direction. At this time, the Iron Wind duo opened their eyes wide and slowly raised their hands. They charged in Ji-Yu's direction. The match hasn't started yet, but the Iron Wind duo has taken the initiative. Even so, let the match begin. After shouting this sentence, he flew forward and directly charged in Ji-Yu's direction. In a short moment, 2 gusts of wind blew. It was like countless knives, charging in Ji-Yu's direction. Ji-Yu coldly snorted, "Do you want to play with wind?" After he said this, Yi Zichen nodded. Ding, the host used Wind Blade. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. After this sentence, the gusts of wind came in front of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu directly jumped up. At this time, he directly raised his hands. At this time, the long sword turned around. The 2 gusts of wind collided with each other. A sense of uneasiness rose in their hearts, and they quickly retreated to the back. After seeing the gusts of wind, their eyes were like poisonous snakes, directly hanging on Ji-Yu's body. Ji-Yu's body flashed and disappeared on the spot. Both of Ji-Yu's hands burst forth in an instant. At this moment, he flew out and swung the long sword heavily. In the next second, Ji-Yu disappeared on the spot, turned around, and flew out. He kicked the opponent's body, and the opponent suddenly fell to the ground. He gradually climbed up, and a trace of a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. One after another, they charged in Ji-Yu's direction. Ji-Yu slowly took a step forward. At this time, a ray of light lit up in the sky. A bolt of lightning struck down. It exploded on his body. At this time, that person's body was charred black. At this time, they were charred black. Ji-Yu kicked up. With a loud bang, the Iron Wind duo flew out at the same time. They fell in a pool of blood and kept wailing. Ji-Yu put the long sword on the neck of one of them. When he saw the long sword, he felt a chill in his heart. He said indifferently, "Iron Wind divided into 2, invincible in the world." After shouting these words, the 2 of them separated. Their eyes were cold and gloomy. Chapter 680. At this moment, Ji-Yu disappeared from her original spot. The Iron Wind duo demons raised their hands. At this moment, a strong wind blew, and the remaining few people flew in front of Ji-Yu. They suddenly raised their heads and said indifferently, "Go to hell." After shouting these words, Ji-Yu suddenly turned around and waved the Kuan-Peng giant sword in her hand. Following a huge explosion, a thick layer of smoke appeared in the surroundings. Everyone looked at the arena. 2 experts of the 3rd layer of the human profound realm against a young boy. No matter how one looked at it, they were in an invincible position. If it wasn't for the fact that Ji-Yu's opponent in the last round was really surprising. This time, they had already lost the confidence to watch. When the smoke dispersed, everyone stuck out their small heads and looked in the direction of the arena. The Iron Wind duo demons were still standing in the arena with a shocked expression. With a cracking sound, their treasures broke into 2 pieces and fell to the ground. Now that their weapons were broken, they could only surrender or face death. In a place like Hell Valley, there was no mercy to speak of. The 2 of them looked at each other, then walked in front of Ji-Yu and half knelt down. "We admit defeat." Ji-Yu put away the Kuan-Peng giant sword. Suddenly, a fierce look appeared in the corner of the 2's eyes. They took out a sharp weapon from nowhere and directly shot it in the direction of Ji-yu. Hearing the sound of something breaking through the air, Ji-yu abruptly turned her head and grabbed the two concealed weapons in her hands. The two of them quickly leaped up. God knows how many experts were soft-hearted at this time, allowing the two brothers to kill each other on the ground. They still remembered the despair in the eyes of those experts before they died. The two of them couldn't help but feel proud in their hearts. They raised their hands at the same time, and a gust of wind Shen energy, with a great compression force, spiraled in their hands. As long as this attack hit, no matter who you are, you won't be able to escape. Thinking of this, the two of them were about to laugh out loud. However, Ji-yu suddenly disappeared and appeared behind the two of them in the blink of an eye. Ding! The host used the dark forest and gained 1 by 999 experience points. He appeared behind the two of them. His face was like an evil spirit from hell. The Iron Wind duo demons, who had killed countless people, showed fear in their eyes when they saw Ji-yu. A silver light flashed. With a loud cracking sound, the two of them fell heavily to the ground. Their bones and flesh were all sent flying by Ji-yu. Looking at this bloody scene, a trace of fear appeared in the eyes of the crowd. They fell to the ground. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Ji-yu sheathed his giant sword. After witnessing Ji-yu's decisive killing spree, everyone began to shout crazily. Blood was nothing in their eyes. They kept cheering. At the same time, in the two private rooms on the second floor, Tian Fang looked at Ji-yu, who was far away in the arena, with a smile on her face. I never thought that there would be such a godly person in this world. The person beside her also slowly said, "That's right, young master. What should we do next?" "Don't worry, he might become a part of our plan." "Yes." In the other private room, a man wearing a golden mask stood in the arena. Looking deeply in the direction of the arena, he said coldly, "This is really interesting." He said indifferently, "Ji-yu, will you be a good opponent for me?" The commentator stood in the arena, and after getting people to clean up, he shouted loudly, "Next, let's welcome the next duel. First, let's welcome Huang Jinjian." Ji-yu was about to leave the arena, but when she saw Huang Jinjian, she stopped and turned around. Huang Jinjian, who was in the arena, also looked in Ji-yu's direction, and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. The two of them looked into each other's eyes. The commentator shouted impatiently, "Let's welcome Huang Jinjian. Let's welcome the next contestant, the giant demon butcher." A giant that was 120 feet tall stepped into the middle of the arena. It was as if the entire ground was shaking. The surrounding crowd kept shouting, "Giant demon, giant demon, giant demon, giant demon." The giant demon butcher slapped his chest. "Huang Jinjian, is it?" After the commentator announced the start of the duel, the giant demon butcher charged forward. The giant devil butcher was the first to charge forward. Who would have thought that such a tall and big body could actually possess such outstanding speed? Ji-yu thought that perhaps she had made the right choice in coming here. Here, she could accumulate more than just an increase in profound strength. She could also gain a wealth of battle experience. The giant demon butcher had actually created 3 afterimages in the middle of the stage. No one knew which afterimage was the real giant demon. When Ji-yu saw this, the corners of her mouth curled into a smile. However, this giant demon butcher really underestimated Huang Jinjian. That person was still standing in the same spot with his hands on his hips. He closed his eyes and did not move at all. The 3 afterimages attacked at the same time, and 3 huge iron fists directly hit Huang Jinjian. Huang Jinjian turned around in an instant and raised his hands. He grabbed the opponent's iron fists, and the iron fists let out a loud cracking sound. The sound of bones breaking echoed throughout the hall. At this moment, the giant demon butcher fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. Blood continuously flowed down from his mouth. His gaze looked in the direction of Ji-yu. As if he was provoking Ji-yu, his gaze locked onto Ji-yu. Ji-yu suddenly turned her head. At this moment, her figure disappeared from the spot. Ji-yu disappeared from the hunting ground. When she walked out, 2 people came forward and said to Ji-yu, "We are from the Safety Alliance. I wonder if Brother Ji is interested in joining us. Ji shook her head. The two people said anxiously, we still have some treasures here. If Brother Ji is interested, we can contribute them. Why choose me? Huang Jinjian is more suitable than me. That's not the case. We just want to be safe in this hell. We were sent here because we opposed the union of 10,000 immortals. We are not evil people. Please. The two people kneeled on the ground. Jiyu's heart softened. She said to the two of them, take me to see. Chapter 681. Even in this bottomless hell, 1,000 years had allowed this group of people to settle down. The place where they lived was not far from the hunting ground. Usually, no one would bother to fight with them. After all, they knew that they would give birth to offspring, so when they were free, they would come and bully them. A small village appeared in front of Jiyu. Two men in armor stood at the entrance of the village. The bright moon shines in the sky. I have my freedom. The two men in front of Jiyu were Da Nyo and Xiao Nyo. They looked at each other, and after giving a secret signal to the guards, they let them in. There were two people standing in the tall buildings on both sides. There was a bloody aura in their eyes. He said faintly, this is the expert we invited from the hunting ground. As long as he is here, we will improve a lot in the future. Da Nyo introduced him to everyone excitedly. Men, women, old, and young all looked in the direction of Jiyu. No one knew what they were thinking. Their eyes were cast on Jiyu. A man walked out and said, my name is Ji Galao. I would like to learn from you. After shouting this sentence, Ji Galao flew in the direction of Jiyu and swung a heavy punch at Jiyu's head. If Da Nyo and Xiao Nyo were fooled, they would have lost the treasure for nothing. In this dark land, they were actually able to grow things. This had attracted the attention of the surrounding forces of the Alliance of Torturers. If it were not for the fact that they did not know how to grow these crops, the hundreds of people living here would have been killed long ago. They did not want to be controlled by others, so they wanted a strong person to be their leader. And now, Jiyu seemed to be very suitable for this position. Jiyu naturally knew that he did not want to kill. He was only at the first level of the spirit profound realm, but he was considered a top expert outside. Here, he could only be bullied. Jiyu raised her hand, caught Ji Galao's blow, and then threw him to the ground. Only to see Gorgesaur spit out a mouthful of blood. When the rest of the people saw that one of their own was injured, they immediately became vigilant. Although they wanted an expert to take charge, they didn't want to be oppressed by one person. Their eyes were fixed on Jiyu. One by one, they took out their treasures. Groglao's men shouted anxiously, wait. After shouting these words, everyone's gazes fell on him. He touched his body. My previous injuries have actually healed. Just now, when Jiyu took action, she injected a burst of profound energy into Ji Galao's body and opened up his blood vessels that were blocked by blood clots. With a face full of admiration, Ji Galao said, young master is indeed unparalleled in the world. This humble one admires you. The remaining people looked at each other. For an expert, it was already a miracle that he was willing to protect them. Now that he was willing to help them heal their injuries, it was even better. After thinking of this in their hearts, a smile appeared on the corners of their mouths one after another. They slowly opened their mouths and said, greetings to young Master Jiyu. While they were talking, a few cries of profound beasts came from outside the door. Everyone turned their heads and looked outside at the same time. A person in charge of guarding the village gate ran in anxiously. Not good, not good. The people of the Alliance of Torturers are here. Just as he finished speaking, several people riding Shen beasts ran in. However, those Shen beasts were all pitch black, and their eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty light. Their leader said slowly, give us 1 virgin from each family and 500 stalks of Shenling grass from each family. Da Nyo took the lead and stepped out. We won't listen to you anymore. The man rubbed his ears as if he had heard wrongly. A sinister smile appeared on his face. Courting death. After shouting this sentence, the two people beside him slowly walked out. Holding huge profound swords in their hands, they heavily chopped down in the direction of Jiyu. Ji Yu's figure flashed and disappeared from the spot in an instant. After waiting for a while, she reappeared on the spot with a human head in her hand. Ding! The host used the dark forest and gained 1 by 999 experience points. The wind blew again. Seeing that their leader's head had been chopped off, they looked at each other and said indifferently, "Boy, how dare you kill the people of the Alliance of Torturers? Good boy, just you wait." They urged their profound beasts to run in another direction. Da Nyo and Xiao Nyo came forward worriedly. What should we do now? When they go back, they will definitely ask all the experts to take action. Yes, the people of the Alliance of Torturers are not ordinary people. Once they suffer a loss, the whole sect will take action together. Everyone said anxiously. Ji Yu said indifferently, "Don't worry, let them come. There has to be a decision made." Hearing this, everyone looked at each other and felt that it was very reasonable. Suddenly, they had an idea. At this moment, the bugle horn was blown, and the humming sound covered the entire square. The entire ground seemed to be trembling as countless fireballs came crashing down in their direction. Ji Yu's aura covered her entire body at that moment, shielding her from the onslaught of fireballs. The fireballs fell on the Qi gang one after another. A few fireballs fell on the side and smashed in the direction of the entrance of the village, burning the whole gate. The rest of the people rode their profound beasts and ran in. The leader was a guy with a full beard. He said indifferently, "Who killed my people? Come out obediently." Ji Yu said indifferently, "It was me." "Good, boy, you have guts. But even so, you still have to die. I will first chop off your left arm and then let you eat it until you die. Ha ha ha. If you have the ability, you can try." Ji Yu said indifferently as if she didn't care about him at all. Hearing this, a ball of anger in his heart rushed to his head. He raised his hand and shouted loudly, "Brothers, kill them all." After the bearded leader shouted these words, the rest of the people patted their profound beasts and flew forward. Ji Yu was about to go forward and fight when Da Nyo, Xiao Nyo and Ji Gulao said, "Leader, let us go." Chapter 682. Da Nyo and Xiao Nyo stared at the people who had always invaded their village. "You're courting death." The bearded leader of the League of Torturers had to admit that Ji Yu had some ability. However, Ji Yu's ability didn't mean that these rotten fish and shrimps had the same ability, not to mention challenging them. Along with the whistling of the horns, the two sides clashed almost instantly. Before Da Nyo and Xiao Nyo charged forward, Ji Yu suddenly stopped them. At the same time, she tossed them 2 pills. Boom! Boom! Following the 3 loud noises, everyone looked in the direction of the noises. It turned out that Da Nyo's Shen strength had increased to the 2nd layer of the human profound realm. Although Xiao Nyo didn't immediately increase his level like his elder brother after taking Ji Yu's pills, he also gained a huge amount of power. He was only 1 step away from the 2nd layer of the human profound realm. Although Ji Yu was only at the 3rd layer of the human profound realm, the power in her body couldn't be underestimated. She had 5 kinds of power of inheritance, and each of them had increased to the 3rd layer of the human profound realm, which was even more terrifying than a 6th layer of the human profound realm expert. Moreover, Ji Yu was an alchemist, so the pills in her hands naturally couldn't be underestimated. At this time, Da Nyo only felt that there was a supreme power in his body. He picked up the big iron hammer in front of him and smashed it down heavily. With a loud bang, a person from the League of Torturers let out a scream. Suddenly, no one dared to come close to him. However, the League of Torturers was famous for their cruelty, so how could they stop because of a small league of protectors? A man who had been transformed from black iron pushed aside his companions in front of him. "You dare to challenge us?" The black iron man felt that he had been greatly insulted. He roared and rushed forward. Although his body was huge, he was still very agile. Da Nyo dodged to the side and dodged the punch. Then, he quickly twisted his body and threw another punch. A loud bang was heard. The Iron Man didn't dodge. He turned his body with his incomparably agile body movement and threw another punch. The collision of profound energy did not produce any trace of light. The strength of the human profound realm was naturally very strong, and the power that erupted from the two of them directly destroyed their clothes. The two of them didn't expect that the other party would be so strong. Both of them retreated and looked at each other. "Brat, you're courting death." Black Iron Man shouted anxiously. "That's right. My family and friends are here. How could I let you destroy them so easily?" Nyo shouted confidently. However, the Black Iron Man was no longer in a hurry. Instead, he looked at him with a playful gaze. "Do you know that as long as a person has something to worry about, it's equivalent to having a weakness? Brat, if you want to fight to the death with me, you should take a look at who you are." After ridiculing him in disdain, he hit his own arm with his palm, and his entire arm flew out. Without the support of Shen energy, the two Shen energies quickly lost contact, and Nyo's body flew in his direction. Nyo could clearly see that the Black Iron Man had taken out another iron arm from where his arm had been cut off. Xiao Nyo's situation wasn't much better than Nyo's. He was also a strength-type Shen cultivator, but a terrifying scene appeared just now. It was as if a man in a long robe with a terrifying face appeared behind him. When Xiao Nyo turned around and waved his precious weapon, the feminine man disappeared in an instant. Xiao Nyo looked around vigilantly. Blood Warden's spear, a superior 8th grade precious weapon. "I like it very much. Why don't you give it to me, and I'll forgive your sins?" This was the precious weapon that his father handed to him before he died. How could Xiao Nyo dare to give it up? Their figures flashed and disappeared. The next moment, he appeared behind Xiao Nyo. "It seems that you don't want to hand over the precious weapon. I'll have to kill you and take it." After shouting this sentence, he raised his hands and waved them heavily in Xiao Nyo's direction. Xiao Nyo subconsciously raised the precious weapon in his hand to block, but he didn't expect that the feminine man's precious weapon would become illusory. It went through Xiao Nyo's precious weapon, and the power of this attack was actually attacking his soul. Unlike the opponents that the two brothers encountered, Laro encountered almost no one who was his opponent. After taking the precious weapon and medicinal pills that Jiyu gave him, he felt a burst of power in his body. Holding the 8th grade precious weapon, the Hurricane Longsword, even if the other people's Shen strength was better than his, their precious weapons would break one after another when they fought against him. The bearded man sneered and waved his hand heavily. Suddenly, hundreds of people rushed in Laro's direction. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 palms. After more and more enemies joined the battle, the relaxed smile on his face suddenly disappeared. At the same time, he became flustered. When the battle had just started, Jiyu directly attacked the bearded man. As the saying goes, to catch bandits, first catch the leader. The bearded man's mount, a white tiger, showed a trace of disdain in its eyes. At the same time, it slapped the mystical beast below it. In an instant, the bearded man jumped up and flew in Jiyu's direction. Ding, the host used 10,000 dust return to 1. Obtained experience points 1 by 999. The sand and stones that had gathered in the surroundings immediately gathered together and solidified. Defensive mystical skill, how ignorant. The corners of his mouth showed a trace of disdain. Accompanied by a loud sound, that person quickly twisted his body and landed on the ground. Kill. Accompanied by a shout, the 2 people beside him directly rushed in Jiyu's direction to kill. Unfortunately, they were facing Jiyu. Jiyu just stretched out her hand in the shape of a sword and waved in the direction of the 2 people. Immediately, 2 earth dragons flew out from the earth wall and wrapped around the 2 people in front of her. Accompanied by Jiyu's heavy hand, the 2 people felt as if their bones were being torn apart. The 2 people flew away and looked in the direction of Jiyu with fear in their eyes. The attack just now made them feel as if they were in a sea of fire. Rolling on the ground, the bearded leader only said a word of trash, and the mystical beast below him bit off their necks. The alliance of torturers did not need injured people. His body heavily hit Jiyu's earth wall. Only one of his hands could be seen breaking through Jiyu's earth wall. However, this action only caused his hands to be completely trapped by the earth wall. The white tiger abandoned the 2 corpses and flew in front of Jiyu. It turned into 2 tornadoes and hit the earth wall. Holding the bearded leader's collar in its mouth, it landed not far away. The bearded leader sneered and said, "You're not bad, join us." Ji Yu wondered if there was something wrong with her ears. How could she hear such a ridiculous thing? "Look at your companions, you have no chance of winning. Wait until my companions escape." However, he never expected Ji Yu to still have a smile on her face. Ding, the host used 18 golden puppets. Obtained 1 by 999 experience. The 18 golden puppets flew out in an instant. 2 puppets flew in the direction of Da Nyo and Xiao Nyo. The Black Iron Man was planning to use his broken arm to kill Da Nyo. Da Nyo was disheartened at this time. If it wasn't for Ji Yu's help, he would have died at their hands. How could he have a chance to fight? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but laugh. One of the 18 golden puppets turned around and heavily waved its sword, hitting the man's body. The Black Iron Man's broken arm was made of the purest black iron. Under this sword, it was broken in half. With a squeak, blood came out of his neck. Blood covered the ground in an instant. The feminine man on Xiao Nyo's side raised the morning treasure in his hand, intending to draw out Xiao Nyo's soul. His Xian power was originally to attack the soul. Even when his heart was dug out by the puppets, his face was still the same expression. Why? He landed heavily on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. As for Ji Gij, he was even more violent. After shouting, the 18 golden puppets came in front of them and raised their hands at the same time. The mysterious sword fell on the opponent's body. The people of the Alliance of Torturers were no match for Ji Gij. With the help of the 18 golden puppets, the brothers Da Nyo and Xiao Nyo, and some people who were originally in the village, the situation was quickly reversed. Ji Yu led the people around her to the original place. They looked coldly at the bearded leader in front of them. The bearded leader was still in the earth wall and didn't know what to do. Ji Yu waved her hand. A huge whirlpool seemed to appear underground. The bearded leader fell into the whirlpool bit by bit. Soon, sand covered his face, his head, and directly sent him to the depths of hell. "We won." As the old man shouted, everyone in the village followed suit. The spies outside the village also brought the news back to their masters. Almost all of the factions had the same thought. If they wanted to regain control of the village, they would have to sacrifice a lot. But in Hell's Valley, human lives were worthless, but human lives were valuable. If they didn't have enough people, they would only face death or be swallowed up. No faction was willing to accept such an outcome. Without this Lord's order, "Don't go near the Alliance of Protectors," all the leaders ordered at the same time. That night, a huge banquet was held. Ji Yu restrained her Xian power and didn't fight, so she got drunk. Chapter 683. The next day, Ji Yu rode on the Xian beast that she had seized from the bearded leader and arrived at the arena without stopping to rest. Huang Jinjian had 2 people standing beside him. He walked up and said, "I'm looking forward to the day we fight." After he left, the 2 people who had been following him stepped forward and looked at Ji Yu with a smile on their faces. "Today, let the 2 of us be your opponents." Their gazes were like venomous snakes staring at Ji Yu. Ji Yu walked away without looking back. When the 2 of them saw Ji Yu's condescending appearance, they were immediately infuriated. "Brat, how dare you ignore us like this? We are Huang Jinjian's disciples." The 2 of them gnashed their teeth as they shouted. However, Ji Yu didn't care. According to Ji Yu's rules, he had to teach Huang Jinjian's disciple a lesson. It was accompanied by the shouts of the commentator. The atmosphere in the arena was ignited. One of the 2 kings of the arena, Huang Jinjian's disciple, was going to fight Ji Yu. This was big news. The few of them rushed to tell each other. They were looking forward to this duel. As expected of Huang Jinjian's disciple, he didn't enter the arena by strolling on the stage. Instead, he chose to enter with a flying sword. Once again, the crowd cheered. The 2 of them were very proud. "Let's see how Ji Yu compares to us." Many people in the audience still had to kill each other for their own points. Although there hadn't been any newcomers for 1,000 years, there were still many people in Hell's Valley. It was unknown who would be able to escape. Who would have the time to watch people kill each other? Ji-yu only had 3 matches. Most of the people who watched Ji-yu's matches were already dead, so this batch of people was a new audience. Ji-yu appeared on the battle ring, and everyone's vigilant eyes locked onto him. Where did this brat come from? They couldn't help but think in their hearts. However, to be able to defeat the giant beastman, he could be considered an expert. Without further ado, everyone was waiting for the duel to start. However, this Ji-yu's way of entering the arena was really hard to support. He just walked up without any aura of an expert, so he couldn't be that strong. Where there were people, there would be places to bet. Almost no one was willing to bet their points on Ji-yu. When Ji-yu heard this, he was as happy as a child. What was this? He was just about to doze off. Someone obediently handed him a pillow. This was simply a joyous occasion, so he put down 80 treasures. Profound stones were not very useful in the arena, but treasures such as wine, treasures, dan beads, and profound grasses, even if they lost to you in exchange, it was not impossible. Of course, you couldn't be killed by the other party. The duel officially begins. The commentator yelled. Huang Jinjian's 2 disciples gave themselves good names, Big Sword and Small Sword. The 2 of them were experts. After hearing the commentator's words, the 2 of them waved their hands at the same time. The swords that were originally inserted into the ground suddenly flew in the direction of Ji-yu. The swords contained a power that could destroy everything in the world. The treasures fell heavily on Ji-yu's body, but his aura shield blocked them in an instant. Good, the moment the duel started, Big Sword and Small Sword used their profound skills. It seems like they don't intend to leave Ji-yu any way out, the commentator said excitedly. As the disciple of the Duel King, it's really frightening. Ji-yu smiled. This level of attack, he didn't know how Huang Jinjian trained his disciples. He waved his hand. A huge amount of profound energy flew past Ji-yu's chi aura. It was like a gust of wind that blew away the 2 swords that had been infused with a huge amount of profound energy. The 2 of them did not expect Ji-yu to be able to break through their moves in one move. Originally, the 2 of them thought that only their master could do this. I wonder how the Big Sword and Small Sword will deal with this. The 2 of them looked at each other and immediately formed sword fingers with their hands. When the profound energy collided with each other, it started to intertwine and connect with each other. It was like a tsunami rushing over. The 2 of them immediately dodged, but the air was already filled with murderous sword energy. Ji-yu wasn't in a hurry. He just waved the Kuan Peng giant sword. The giant Kuan Peng broke away from the giant sword. The Kuan Peng was the overlord of the sky. It bared its fangs, and when the sword energy came in front of it, it just opened its mouth and swallowed it. It looked at the 2 of them with dissatisfaction, as if it was very disdainful. The Big Sword and Small Sword seemed to fly forward and arrived in front of them. After the giant sword landed heavily on the ground, Yi Zichen was stunned. Then, a loud boom was heard. The Kuan Peng giant sword had already swallowed a sword energy, but its expression seemed to be very unhappy. It hoped that the Big Sword and Small Sword would obediently hand over the rest of the sword energy. The sword energy was swallowed by the opponent, and he seems to be dissatisfied. This may be the biggest humiliation of a swordsman. I wonder how the 2 of them will deal with it next. Ji-yu looked at the Kuan Peng giant sword in front of him, and there was a trace of disdain in the corner of his mouth. Let's see how you will deal with it. The Big Sword and Small Sword seemed to be crazy as they kept releasing their sword energy. Unfortunately, things didn't go as they wished. The sword energy was completely absorbed by the Kuan Peng giant sword without hesitation. Ji-yu looked at the 2 of them in front of him and said indifferently, "Surrender. You are his disciples. I can let you 2 go." But when these words came out, the 2 of them felt that they were greatly insulted. Didn't you know how to swallow the sword energy? Then you can't swallow the real sword, right? With such thoughts, they rushed in front of Ji-yu, raised their hands, and slapped in front of Ji-yu. Ji-yu also raised his hands at the same time, blocking the 2 precious weapons in front of him. "If this is all you have, you can leave now." Humiliation, it was another great humiliation. The two of them attacked again. A trace of killing intent appeared in Jiyu's eyes, and he swung his sword down heavily. The two of them knew that they couldn't dodge it no matter what. A ray of light fell on the ground. It isolated the people in front of him. A precious weapon made of golden black iron was inserted into the ground, but Jiyu didn't stop and directly came in front of them. Huang Jinjian had no choice but to call back his precious weapon. If he was a little later, his two disciples would have to meet the king of hell. Jiyu didn't panic. He just pulled his sword back and clashed with his sword. He stood in front of Jiyu, and the two of them looked at each other. Jiyu said indifferently, "How about today's battle?" The commentator said with a smile, "Of course, the two of them lost." Jiyu locked his eyes on the commentator. "What do you think?" Huang Jinjian said indifferently, "You won." After Jiyu left, the two of them wanted to support their master, but they didn't expect that their master's hands were trembling at this moment, as if they were about to break in the next moment. "This person is really scary. Don't provoke him anymore." Jiyu returned to his village. Suddenly, someone ran over and said that the immortal grass couldn't be raised. Jiyu went forward to check and immediately laughed. It turned out that this was a fertile land in Hell's Valley. Jiyu told them about his knowledge of farmers before he transmigrated. Everyone buried the corpses of the Shen beasts that died a few days ago. Sure enough, the ground became fertile again. Everyone's eyebrows were unexpectedly raised in joy. Jiyu smiled faintly. These people were all unwilling to commit crimes with the union of 10,000 immortals, and they were worth cherishing. They returned home and were preparing to sleep when suddenly, a group of people appeared at the village gate. "Where is your leader?" "We, Liang Xuanzhua, invite him." Jiyu asked indifferently, "Who are you waiting for?" "We are also people who love the land and the cultivation of Shen cultivators, so our leader is looking forward to forming an alliance with him." Jiyu nodded. Ji said that he wanted to protect Jiyu so that she wouldn't be deceived by these people with bad intentions. Jiyu laughed. She only taught his granddaughter to say a few witty words. She didn't expect that he would learn it so quickly. She spurred her horse and went in the other direction. Jiyu galloped on the main road. The people beside her quickly caught up with her. With great difficulty, they finally caught up and brought Jiyu to the front of the crowd. A huge hole appeared in front of Jiyu. When she went in, she saw that she was surrounded by young girls. Jiyu was a little surprised. "Why is this?" The two people beside her replied embarrassedly, "In our clan, women automatically get pregnant, so we are all women. It is also because of this that others have taken a fancy to us." Jiyu immediately understood. It was impossible to break through Shen cultivation in 1,000 years here. Then the test of life and death appeared in front of these people. They didn't just have offspring. In Hell's Valley, offspring represented the fate of being killed or turned into a murderous maniac. Even if they couldn't bear to see this scene, it didn't mean that their desires would disappear. So these women became objects for them to vent their desires. Every once in a while, a young girl would be captured. Tomorrow was the day when the Slayers' Alliance would come to collect rent. Although it was called rent, it was clearly a kidnapping. Great leader Liang walked valiantly in front of Jiyu and said generously, "Sir, please take a seat. This humble one is Liang Jing. Greetings to Sir." Although she was called Jing, she didn't look like someone who could calm down. Jiyu reported her name and sat down. Chapter 684. Great leader Liang still had a forthright expression on his face. Unknowingly, he had voiced out his wish. No matter what Jiyu decided, he would protect his people firmly. They looked at each other. Their gazes were fixed on Jiyu. Jiyu said calmly, "Ha ha ha, great leader Liang is right. Why don't we hang together? Let's go forward." After hearing Jiyu's words, great leader Liang became excited. It was great to be able to ally with Jiyu. The corners of their mouths were full of smiles. Great leader Liang immediately called everyone over and beat the big drum in front of him. Boom! Boom! At this moment, the sound of 3 drums began to vibrate. They all took a step forward. However, a gust of wind suddenly appeared in the sky. After both of their hands were cut open, the blood dripped onto the big bowl. The big bowl emitted a mysterious light. At this moment, the light suddenly brightened up. At this moment, the two forces joined together. The two forces could be considered to have formed an alliance. Great leader Liang stood on the stage and raised his wine glass generously. He said heroically, "Everyone, from today onwards, we will not be bullied by others. Long live, long live." Below the stage, everyone was cheering loudly. They were excited that they had chosen such a famous lord. They waved their hands continuously. At the same time, they were shouting loudly. Along with the sound of the bugle horn, they slowly stepped out and ran forward. They saw a group of people from the Slaughter Alliance chasing after a caravan. The rest of the people wanted to get up and take a look. After all, the two sides had just formed an alliance. It was time to test them. Jiyu did not say anything. She just rushed out with the two people behind her. When the members of the Killer Alliance saw Jiyu, they smiled faintly. "That's the kid who killed the people from the Slaughter Alliance. Catch him and hang his head on the pillar outside." Jiyu landed on the ground. The two people in front of her took out their treasured weapons and charged toward Jiyu. Jiyu disappeared on the spot. After a while, they charged toward Jiyu. They flew up and charged toward Jiyu. Their eyes locked on Jiyu. They disappeared in an instant. He waved the long sword in his hand and charged forward. He turned around and swung his sword heavily in Jiyu's direction. In the next second, he abruptly turned around and looked in front of him. He said indifferently, "Go to hell." After shouting this sentence, Jiyu suddenly turned around. He turned around and placed the long sword in his hand on the ground. Along with the fall of the heavy sword, the two Shen energies collided heavily. Jiyu suddenly flew up. However, at this moment, the two people flew back. Jiyu snorted coldly and released the dark force in his hand to the maximum. Ding! The host used Raging Flames and gained 1 by 999 experience points. At this moment, two balls of flames flew into the sky and fell, burning their bodies. The two people let out a scream. In the past, when they chased these people from the Survivors Alliance, they could only huddle up in their own small village. If it wasn't for the existence of the young lady from the Liang family, their village would have been finished. After shouting these two words, the two people looked at each other and directly came in front of Jiyu. Jiyu directly burned the two balls of flames on their bodies. They were swallowed by the flames, and in the end, only their bones were left. At this moment, Jiyu put away his precious weapon. He turned around and said indifferently, "As your ally, I feel that you can't stay in this place any longer." However, this place had already been targeted. It was impossible for Jiyu to turn around every time to save them. The two people looked at each other. Great leader Liang walked out and said indifferently, "In that case, everyone will rest for a night. Tomorrow, we will follow brother Jiyu back." With the addition of this group of people, even if Jiyu did not force them, in time, the alliance of protectors would multiply and develop sufficiently. All he needed to do was to raise their strength. At this thought, Jiyu stood up, turned around, and walked in the other direction. He said indifferently, "Jiyu, how dare you?" The leader of the Killers Alliance clenched his fists. There was a trace of killing intent in his eyes. They rarely paid attention to the matters of the duel arena, but he felt that Jiyu must be related to the duel arena in some way. Thinking of this, he opened his mouth and said, "Immediately investigate where this person came from." The two people knelt on the ground and said indifferently, "Yes." After shouting this sentence, the two people left. After investigating for a while, they came back and knelt in front of their leader. Reporting to the leader, "Jiyu is a newcomer. We haven't had a newcomer for thousands of years, so that person values him very much. He wants to see how far he can go in the duel arena. That old man should have died a long time ago. Even if I touch his people, what can he do? Send out 80 people to eradicate that village." After shouting these words, the two of them knelt on the ground, turned around, and slowly retreated. Jiyu was still sleeping. Suddenly, he felt that there was a kitten around his leg. He opened his eyes wide and saw leader Liang massaging his legs. "You're awake." "Leader Liang, what do you mean by this?" She sat in front of Ji and said, "I don't know how strong you are, but there is no doubt that you are very strong. You are stronger than all of them combined. If I can serve you, it will be enough." "Damn it, where is the outspoken heroine of the day? Give me back my heroine." At this moment, Ji stood up and said indifferently, "You don't have to do this. I am not that kind of person." Seeing Ji appraising him, leader Liang's face turned red. He didn't know what to say. He turned his head and said indifferently, "We are allies. Of course, we will rise or fall together. There is no need to panic." After saying this, Ji turned around and walked in another direction. Great leader Liang smiled helplessly. He had never thought that in the past, it was always others who pursued him. Why did Ji not even look at him when he took the initiative to deliver himself to her? If this were to spread, how could he face others? However, since there was no daylight in this world, he could only rely on his own heart to turn around and walk in another direction. They looked up and saw that there was still a black veil above them. They sighed, pulled their horses, and walked straight out. Ji started to plan. He planned to settle these people down and return to the duel arena. He and Huang Jinjian would have to fight in the end. But to his surprise, when he arrived at the entrance of the village, he saw that the village was surrounded. They looked up and directly in front of them. They saw that the people in front of them were surrounding Ji. It seemed that they didn't bleed enough last time. It wasn't enough to make them afraid. He looked around and saw that several people from different factions were standing in the distance. They were waiting to see what would happen later. Ji smiled faintly. "This is simply too stupid." He said indifferently, "Today, I will kill you once and for all." A few people burst out laughing. "Ji, aren't you being a little too presumptuous? Do you know who we are? Kill." After saying this, they looked at each other and said slowly, "Brothers from afar, can you help us?" They rushed forward and looked at the people in front of them. They said indifferently, "Kill Ji and take back our things." As they shouted, they all arrived before Ji and fixed their gazes on him. Just at that moment, the profound crossbows exploded. Countless arrows flew out and landed on the bodies of the people in front of them. One after another, they fell into a pool of blood. The blood on their bodies was incomparably thick. Who would have thought that the profound realm experts would actually die under the profound crossbows? However, these Shen crossbows were 7th grade weapons specially made by Ji. It was easy for them to fight a peak LV1 human profound realm expert. However, Ji had already handed these crossbows to the villagers. Daniu, Xiaoniu, Ge, and the others looked in front of them and fell silent. They didn't know what would happen in the future, but they knew that Ji had given them the chance to survive. At this time, if they still didn't know how to be flexible and how to survive, they would be too stupid. Therefore, these crossbows were all shot out. After blocking the crossbow bolts, the remaining forces finally came to their senses. This group of people was no longer a group of sheep. Chapter 685. The members of the Killers' Alliance looked in front of them in fear. There was a trace of fear in their eyes. Those people just now were all lying in a pool of blood. They looked at each other and walked towards Ji. They summoned their treasured weapons and held them in their hands. Then, another round of arrows was released. However, it was clear that the survivors were no longer afraid of the crossbows. They looked in Ji's direction with disdain on their faces. One of them urged his horse forward and said faintly, "I know you are very powerful, but so what? We know where your weakness lies." After shouting this, he waved his hand. Suddenly, 40 to 50 people came out from the side and held all the men, women, and children in front of Ji. "Leader, we've already captured all of those people and brought them here." The leader of the Killers' Alliance looked in Ji's direction and said lightly, "Ha ha ha, boy, so what if you are powerful? I am now holding a sword. As long as I give the order, they will all go to hell. If you dare to move, they will immediately die under the sword." After shouting this sentence, Ji said lightly, "Is that so? You know what I hate most in this life is when people threaten me." He waved his hand slightly and a dozen people beside him stepped forward. They put their long swords on Ji's neck. In the blink of an eye, Ji's hand flashed with a dark light. Ding! The host used the 18 golden puppets. The reward is 1 times 999 experience points. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The 18 golden puppets have broken through to the small success level. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The 18 golden puppets have evolved into the 18 golden Arhats. Ji could feel that the 18 golden-bodied Arhats on his body seemed to draw out a trace of mental power in an instant and poured it into his body. After receiving this powerful mental strength, he slowly stood up. The 18 golden Arhats arrived in front of everyone in an instant. With the help of Ji's dark forest, they flew in front of the villagers and waited for them to land on the ground before taking out a treasure. These treasures were all superior grade 7 treasures forged by Ji. It was incomparably sharp. In the next moment, they raised their hands and swung it out heavily. The two profound energies collided with each other, producing a catcher sound. The treasures in the hands of the Killer Alliance fell to the ground one after another. They had never expected that the treasures in Ji's hands would be so powerful. A single slash was all it took to break their treasured weapons. At this time, they looked at each other and turned around. At this time, the dark forest once again appeared in the void. The 18 golden puppets led the villagers in front of them into the dark forest. They led the villagers and landed behind Ji. The 18 golden Arhats knelt down in front of Ji one after another and said solemnly, "Greetings, young Master Ji. Thank you for bestowing us with spiritual wisdom. From today onwards, we will follow you, young Master, regardless of life or death." After saying this, they looked at each other and stood up. The group of people rushed forward and attacked in the direction of Ji. In the next moment, Ji held the treasure in his hand and appeared in front of the crowd in a flash. He raised the treasure in his hand and directly slashed in the direction of Ji. The giant Kuan Peng sword in Ji's hand suddenly appeared in the next moment. A Kuan Peng soul flew out. At this moment, the Kuan Peng soul opened its bloody mouth and took a deep breath. It seemed to have the intent to swallow the sky. It radiated and absorbed the people in front of it. Those people were swallowed into its stomach. A few people who rushed forward fell into the Kuan Peng's stomach in the blink of an eye. The leader of the Killer Alliance, who had witnessed all this, was infuriated and covered his body in an instant. Mystical skill, layers of stone mountain. It was actually an earth-rank mystical skill. The surrounding sand quickly gathered together, forming large boulders. Those huge stones fell in the direction of Ji like a meteor shower. Ji picked up the giant Kuan Peng sword beside him and waved it in the next moment. He waved it in the direction of those stones. The 18 golden Arhats did not wait for long. They jumped out one by one in an instant and slowly brought those treasures in front of Ji. Ji turned around and floated in the air. The dark force in his hand heavily waved the sword in front of him. The huge sword Chi made a loud sound and smashed the huge stones in front of him. Those fragments fell to the ground. "Ha ha ha, you've been fooled, boy." After shouting out those words, those fragments actually turned into star-like light. "You don't know, right? This profound skill of mine can borrow the power of the stars to transform into a formation. Within this formation of mine, no matter who it is, they will not be able to escape. Furthermore, they will suffer heavy injuries. As long as you enter, you will quickly turn into a pool of blood." Ji ignored his words. He just closed his eyes and felt the movement of the array beside him. The 18 golden puppets and the villagers stood firmly in front of Ji. Their gazes were vigilant as they scanned their surroundings, regardless of how the array would change later. They made up their minds to protect Ji even if they had to sacrifice themselves. Their gazes began to search the surroundings, as if they would kill any unrelated person who appeared later. Suddenly, a scream was heard. He looked around, and when he saw that they had left, he turned his head and looked out. He saw that his eyes were locked on the people in the distance. He said faintly, "What happened?" Huang Laogen has turned into a pool of blood. He shouted this sentence nervously and looked around. Ji Yu said lightly, "Let me take a look." It turned out that in this array, the blood in the stars was gradually being pulled out bit by bit. He took a deep breath and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He slowly took a step forward. At this moment, the blood on third Uncle Nyo's body was being pulled out bit by bit. After Ji Yu sealed his acupoints, he observed carefully. The blood was still being pulled out. He raised his head. He couldn't see any stars. Where did the power of the stars come from? Ji Yu was puzzled. Right at this moment, because he was too close to third Uncle Nyo, the blood on his body was being pulled out crazily. He used his spiritual power to suppress it. He used his mental power to expel the dark force. It turned out that it was the art of blood. No wonder it could pull out the blood on others. However, it must have the dark force on his body as a primer. Thinking of this, Ji Yu opened his eyes. At this moment, he slowly took a step forward. In an instant, he disappeared on the spot. He took out his precious weapon and swung it heavily. A terrifying dark force flew out from the artifact in Ji Yu's hand and collided with the earthen array. The earthen array shook slightly. "Ha ha ha, what a fool. Do you think my array can be broken so easily by you?" He laughed out loud. At that moment, Ji Yu disappeared in a flash. In the next moment, he appeared in front of the crowd. He raised his head and waved the bejeweled weapon in his hand. It was accompanied by a loud noise. At this moment, the mountain of earth and rocks slowly collapsed, and the rocks fell to the ground. The corners of Ji Yu's mouth curled into a smile as he said indifferently, "This is how I'm going to break your mystical skill." After he finished speaking, Yi Zichen nodded. Shock was written all over the slaughterer leader's face. "Just now, when I checked, I found your dark force in their bodies. So, I deliberately waved my dark force and merged it with the stone mountain. This is how I broke your array." He stretched out his hand and waved it around. At this moment, the soil and rocks flew up and Ji Yu's lips curled into a smile. "Now, I'll return the array to you." After shouting this sentence, the stone flew in front of the leader of the Killer Alliance. He looked out and did not expect that he would fall into his own array. The members of the Killer's Alliance let out miserable shrieks one after another. The blood on their bodies was sucked out in an instant. Only the leader was able to hold on for a while. They could sense that Ji Yu's spiritual power had reached such a terrifying level. They locked their eyes on Ji Yu. With a flash, Ji Yu disappeared from where he stood. She came in front of the leader of the Killer Alliance and held his neck. Now, he had to resist Ji Yu's blood array with all his strength. He spat out a mouthful of blood. "Fight," he thought. Suddenly, he raised his head and picked up the Kuan-Peng sword in Ji Yu's hand. He held the sword hilt and charged towards Ji Yu. The two of them exchanged hundreds of blows in the air. It was too terrifying. The leader of the Killer Alliance was only left with fear. Each of Ji Yu's moves was more ferocious than the previous one. As each move overlapped, not only did Ji Yu's strength not weaken, it seemed that his cultivation of the mysterious art had improved even more. "Ji Yu, you forced me to do this." Chapter 686. The leader of the Killer Alliance looked at Ji Yu in disbelief. Ji Yu said calmly, "Boy, you've got guts." After shouting this, Ji Yu disappeared on the spot. In front of everyone, he turned around and swung his sword heavily. A huge explosion was heard. Blood flowed from the corner of the mouth of the leader of the Killer Alliance, and a huge red mark appeared on his body. "Very good." After saying this, he rushed in the direction of Ji Yu. Ji Yu jumped up and grasped the Kuan-Peng giant sword in his hand. Their weapons collided. A mouthful of blood flowed from their mouths, and they instantly fell into a pool of blood. The corners of Ji Yu's mouth curled into a smile. He waved his hand, and after shouting these words, they turned around and gradually walked in another direction step by step. The villagers came out one after another. Seeing the head of the leader of the Killer Alliance being chopped off by Ji Yu, they all looked envious. Their faces were filled with envy and madness. Everyone was holding all kinds of things and placing them on the ground. They kept shouting, "Long live, long live, long live." When Ji Yu saw the people of other forces coming up with smiles on their faces, he knew that from today on, the villagers would not be threatened anymore. Thinking of this, he turned his head and slowly walked in another direction. The duel arena was particularly crowded today. Many masters came because today was the battle between Ji Yu, Huang Jinjian, and Tian Xiu. The sound of a whistle was heard. The commentator shouted, "Begin." Huang Jinjian crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked in the direction of Ji Yu. The woman beside him also stood in the same place and did not move. The three of them stood in a corner. At this moment, a voice slowly spread over. Huang Jinjian had been ambushed by Ji Yu the last time and had been struck between his thumb and forefinger. It had taken him a few days to recover. Thinking of this, he turned around. He waved his two sword fingers in the direction of Ji Yu. Suddenly, the golden sword behind him flew out and floated in the air, making two circles in the air. It split into two and flew in the direction of Ji Yu and Tian Xiu. Ji Yu turned around and spun in the air. At this time, the golden sword kept stabbing in the direction of Ji Yu. Ji Yu looked in the direction of Tian Fang. He saw that Tian Fang kept moving up and down in front of the golden sword, as if she was a god, dancing gracefully. Even a profound skill could have such graceful movements. This was something that Ji Yu had never expected. He took 2 steps forward and the Kunpeng giant sword appeared in his hand. He swung it heavily. Ding! The host swung the Kunpeng giant sword and gained 1 by 999 experience points. The Kunpeng's soul flew in front of everyone as if it wanted to eat a little bug. It flew down and opened its bloody mouth. Who knew that Huang Jinjian would go through the Kunpeng's weapon spirit? He disappeared on the spot. After a while, he slowly took a step forward. Ji Yu said calmly, "Huang Jinjian is really good. You're not bad either. Brothers, do you have to fight to the death with this little girl?" Huang Jinjian said disdainfully, "If we don't move forward, I'm afraid you won't let us go, right?" After hearing this, Tian Xiu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. "Brother, what are you thinking? I'm a good person." After shouting this, he flew in front of Ji Yu. Compared to a threat like Tian Xiu, Ji Yu, who was in front of him, was the greatest threat. After sensing this, Ji Yu suddenly turned around and picked up the Kunpeng giant sword in front of her. She grabbed the sword hilt and attacked the opponent. Huang Jinjian held his own weapon and collided heavily with Ji Yu's weapon. A smile appeared on his face. "Boy, you're still too young. But your talent is not bad. If you cultivate here for a while, maybe this old man can't compare to you." After he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground. Huang Jinjian's face was full of disbelief. "How is this possible? How is this possible? How can you break my move?" Ji Yu smiled faintly and did not react. He just disappeared from where he was and slowly walked forward to stand in front of Tian Xiu. Tian Xiu felt goosebumps all over her body. There was a trace of fear in her eyes. The strength displayed by Ji Yu was too terrifying. He held the Kunpeng giant sword and said flatly, "Destiny old man, you're the key to leaving this place, right?" Hearing that they could leave, everyone stared at old man Tianming in surprise. Old man Tianming laughed, "I didn't expect you to see through it so quickly. My immortal spring water isn't finished yet." Everyone glanced at each other. Destiny old man said that he wasn't water from a pond, so what was he? In their hearts, they didn't know what the immortal spring water was. He walked forward and opened his hands. After he raised his hands, the Xian energy in the heaven and earth danced. A white light emerged from their bodies. The white light all turned to the bottom of the stage. Ji Yu frowned and raised her fist. At this moment, she raised her hand and punched the ground. A cracking sound came from the ground. It was as if the ground was falling down. A sea of blood appeared in front of everyone. It turned out that what they had been drinking wasn't the immortal spring water, but the ardent blood water. This water could transform a Xian cultivator's cultivation into vitality. That was why they seemed to be able to live for so long. Of course, There were some people who didn't have this water, so they didn't feel anything strange. Ji Yu slowly took a step forward and locked her eyes on her opponent. Destiny Old Man had already added something to the water. As long as he activated the formation, it would absorb all the blood in their bodies. Ji Yu turned her head and said indifferently, "Kill." In the blink of an eye, Old Man Destiny flew in front of Ji Yu and grabbed Huang Jinjian. After all, Huang Jinjian had drunk quite a bit of this spring water. Although he lost today, he didn't think that he was a slave to others. He lifted Shou Anli. Suddenly, in the next second, Shou Anli was stunned. Ji Yu pulled him behind her and waved Huang Jinjian's fingers. At this moment, all the swords were sent flying. A rain of swords fell from the sky. Clanging sounds rang out continuously. Destiny Old Man laughed. Huang Jinjian's treasured weapon didn't have any effect. He turned around and sent out a heavy slap. Along with the sound of an explosion, he flew up. Destiny Elder took 2 steps forward. The earth energy on his body flew out and covered his body. As the earth energy continued to reverberate, he grabbed Huang Jinjian's neck. "You should be my sacrifice. Otherwise, why would I keep the 3 of you alive? Originally, I thought that there would be a winner and a loser between the 2 of you today. Ha ha ha." He laughed loudly. At this moment, Huang Jinjian slowly fell into the sea of fire. At this moment, the sea of blood covered their bodies. Huang Jinjian, a cold swordsman, directly stretched out his hand at this moment, as if he was shouting for help. Ji Yu disappeared. After a while, Ji Yu gradually took 2 steps forward. At this time, the rest of the people came forward in Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu said indifferently, "Tian Xiu, run." After receiving Ji Yu's reminder, Tian Xiu reacted. Just as he was about to run back, he didn't expect that there would be lightning in the sky at this moment. The power of lightning was accumulating in the sky. The power of lightning instantly fell down. Ji Yu flew forward and caught the person in front of him. Tian Xiu had always been hurting others, but he didn't expect to be at a disadvantage today. Now, he was being chased by his master. As he thought of this, he disappeared from where he was in an instant. Ji Yu reached out and grabbed Tian Xiu, pulling her behind him. The corners of his mouth curved into a smile. He slowly took 2 steps forward. In the next moment, Ji Yu's Kuan-Peng giant sword was already slashing in Destiny Old Man's direction. Destiny Old Man's earth energy covered his body in an instant. He turned around and took 2 steps forward. The Kuan-Peng giant sword slashed down and the 2 weapons collided. Destiny Old Man used a crutch-like weapon. He turned around and disappeared in an instant. He disappeared in an instant and took 2 steps forward. "Boy, you have some ability. Hand over Tian Xiu and this old man can accommodate you under this old man." After saying this, he opened his mouth and said, "Kill." Destiny Old Man snorted coldly, "You don't know how to adapt to the situation." Chapter 687. Tianming Old Man flew in front of Ji Yu. His eyes were filled with disdain as he charged towards Ji Yu. He exchanged glances with each other. The spring water kept reverberating and the blood water danced in the air like a spring. It was as if evil dragons were flying out. When they arrived in front of Ji Yu, the blood dragons coiled around the bodies of those people, and the blood in their bodies was sucked dry one after another. Tianming Old Man watched as the blood gathered in front of him. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He took 2 steps forward, and the Xian energy in his hand continued to gather together. The blood was poured into his palm, and he waved his palm heavily. The blood dragons roared and rushed in front of one of the people. In the next moment, the spectators were sucked dry. Ji Yu and Tianming Old Man glanced at each other. They had never expected that Tianming Old Man would want to kill the spectators instead of them. Originally, I planned to use this move when the 7 stars gathered. I didn't expect that an ignorant child like you would ruin my plan. Tianming Old Man sneered and appeared in front of Ji Yu in the blink of an eye. He dodged Ji Yu's figure. He reached forward with his withered claws, wanting to grab the person in front of him. At this moment, The silk handkerchief in her hand flew out. In an instant, the silk handkerchief flew out and wrapped around his withered arm. With a cold snort, the two silk handkerchiefs suddenly broke into pieces. Ji-yu appeared in front of the crowd in a flash. He said faintly, "Let go of your hand." "You like this girl?" Tianming old man smiled. Ji-yu ignored his words and took a step forward. In the next moment, countless fine sand flew out from under Ji-yu's feet. Ding! Host used the Earth Roaming Dragon. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Strictly speaking, the Earth Roaming Dragon was more powerful than the Earth Prison. Tianming old man's hands and feet were entangled by the Earth Roaming Dragon. At this moment, the sand started to sink down. After seeing the sand, Ji-yu's Kuan-Peng sword appeared in his hand. He picked it up and flew out. Ding! Host used the Raging Fire. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. The Raging Fire instantly infected the bodies of those people. As the fire burned, the crowd screamed and locked their eyes on Ji-yu. Tianming old man, who was supposed to be used as a sacrifice to the Blood Sea, had been burned clean by Ji-yu's Raging Fire. A trace of anger appeared in his eyes. "How dare you, brat? You're so rampant." After shouting this, he flew forward and came in front of Ji-yu. He raised the Kuan-Peng sword in his hand and directly attacked Ji-yu. Tianming old man stepped on the 7 stars and merged his Shen Qi into the ground in an instant. In an instant, countless streams of blood spurted out from the ground and directly hit Ji-yu. However, Ji-yu's Raging Fire cloak directly absorbed the flames into his body. Ji-yu took a step forward. He directly covered his body with the Raging Fire cloak. Tianming old man looked at him in confusion and asked, "Brat, you actually have a weapon spirit in your body?" When he saw Ji-yu use the Kuan-Peng sword, he felt a trace of fear in his heart. He sensed that Ji-yu's weapon spirit was very strong. There was a powerful artifact spirit within the artifact. But that wasn't the end of it. He looked up and saw that even Ji-yu's clothes had an artifact spirit. This kid was a treasure from head to toe. If he killed him, he would use his flesh and blood to create his own fountain of youth. After shouting these words, his body flashed and disappeared from the spot. He took 2 steps forward and said faintly, "Kid, just you wait." He flew in front of Ji-yu and reached out to grab Ji-yu's Gang Qi. The Gang Qi suddenly exploded and Ji-yu took 2 steps forward. Ji-yu disappeared in the blink of an eye. He turned around and swung down the Kuan-Peng giant sword in his hand. The corner of Tianming old man's mouth curled up into a smile. "Kid, you think you can break through my Gang Qi?" Ji-yu pulled the precious weapon in front of her and suddenly turned her body around. She swung the precious weapon heavily and the 2 weapons collided at this moment. However, to Tianming old man's surprise, the Kuan-Peng sword in Ji-yu's hand flew out a weapon spirit. It directly pounced on his body and swallowed his soul. After letting out a scream, Tianming old man fell to the ground softly. Ji-yu kept waving the Kuan-Peng sword in his hand. Both of Tianming old man's arms were broken and fell to the ground. Old man Tianming looked fearfully in Ji-yu's direction. Ji-yu picked up the Kuan-Peng sword in front of him and twisted his body quickly. The weapon opened a huge hole in Tianming old man's body. After Tianming old man died, Ji-yu obtained all his points. Several people in the duel arena lowered their heads with fear in their eyes. They raised their hands. Ji-yu said faintly, "Give me the flying locust stone and those things." The owner of this place had died at the hands of Ji-yu. The staff of the duel arena did not dare to disobey. They could only involuntarily swallow a mouthful of saliva. They took out a flying locust stone and handed it to Ji-yu. After getting the flying locust stone, Ji-yu planned to get up and leave. Although Tianming old man was dead, the taboo of the union of 10,000 immortals still existed. Ji-yu did not think it was a good thing to let these people go. He gave a heaven-rank Shen skill to Leader Liang. Seeing that Ji-yu was leaving, Leader Liang was a little reluctant. "You will come back. Maybe we will meet again in the future," Ji-yu said heavily. Tian Xiu'er stood in the distance and watched them walk into the taboo. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Ji-yu flew into the circle. With a thought, He connected with the array of the Gold City sect and disappeared in the blink of an eye. A moment later, he disappeared from the spot. He appeared in the same place with a smile on his face. The two Xian-Qi outlined together and a small circle of light appeared on the ground. Ji-Yu returned to the Gold City sect, but he never expected that Tian Xiu would follow closely behind Ji-Yu. With a flash of his body, he disappeared from the spot. A moment later, Tian Xiu also slowly floated down. She waved the silk handkerchief in her hand and disappeared in the blink of an eye, running down the mountain. Ji-Yu sensed Tian Xiu's appearance. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. He never expected that someone would be able to follow him out. However, it was just a little Tian Xiu, so he let her be. Ji-Yu came out in the blink of an eye. They raised their heads, and there was a smile in their eyes. When the elders saw that their sect leader was able to walk out of the Demon Valley so safely, a smile appeared at the corner of their mouth. He said lightly, "We congratulate sect leader for being able to come out of Hell Valley safe and sound." After shouting these words, they fixed their eyes on Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu took 2 steps forward and said lightly, "I've already obtained the holy treasure. I don't know if it's still here." The rest of the elders came forward, cupped their hands, and placed plates of things on the table. There were countless heavenly treasures on the plates. Ji-Yu's eyes lit up. He took 2 steps forward and took the thing in front of him. Ji-Yu raised his hands and moved them forward. The pagoda gradually took shape. It was built using the help of Jin City's workers. Jin City had sent people to build the pagoda. At this moment, they poured all the Xian-Qi into the pagoda. Now that the pagoda had not taken any effect, they fixed their eyes on the pagoda in front of them. He poured the Xian-Qi into the pagoda. Accompanied by a burst of Xian-Qi, the pagoda emitted a halo of light. Ji-Yu slowly stepped out. At this moment, Ji-Yu turned around and took out a treasure. Ji-Yu picked up the treasure in his hand and 2 pieces flew out. He poured all the Xian-Qi into the pagoda. At this moment, the flying locust stone and the rest of the heavenly treasures flew into the pagoda. It was as if they were connected. Not long after, a ray of light appeared in the pagoda. They all flew into the pagoda. Seeing this scene, he kept turning his head back, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. After shouting the word "rise," the pagoda slowly took shape. The people in front of him stood up. Ji-Yu walked in and entered the pagoda. Then, the pagoda was filled with treasures. After he walked in, he raised his head. The rest of the people walked into the pagoda. It was a very good spiritual energy. I can sense a lot of Xian-Qi here. Chapter 688. All the disciples of the Jincheng sect were shocked by the pagoda that pierced the sky. They slowly approached the pagoda with a look of surprise in their eyes. What was going on? How could it be so powerful? What they saw inside the pagoda was a pagoda that was emitting a holy light. Ji-Yu looked down from above and said slowly to the crowd below, "Now that the cultivation pagoda has been completed, the Jincheng sect will share it with all the inner and outer disciple." The moment they heard Ji-Yu's words, everyone cried out in surprise. "Sect leader is mighty, sect leader is mighty." It was unknown who was the first to shout, but the rest of the people entered the pagoda one after another. They only saw that the inside of the pagoda was filled with dense Xian energy. Moreover, as they walked up to a higher level, they could feel that the Xian energy was even more powerful. In their eyes, they all felt admiration for Ji-Yu as their sect leader. The Jincheng sect should have changed their sect leader long ago. The old fart from before was completely delaying the development of their sect. Ji-Yu naturally did not know what these disciples were thinking, but their thoughts were not in Ji-Yu's mind. As the surrounding dark force poured in, many disciples hovered in place. Ji-Yu took the treasure into his hands and flew to the top of the pagoda in a flash. He raised his head and said indifferently, "7th grade array formation, earth overturning array formation." After shouting this sentence, a huge 5-star light appeared from the ground. The 5-star light seemed to be released in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the 2 dark forces colluded together. At this moment, the formation exploded the entire pagoda. At this moment, Ji-yu took a step forward and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the next moment, Ji-yu flew up. Looking at Ji-yu slowly coming in front of them, their faces were full of surprise. After the entire ground was covered by the light emitted by the pagoda. Within the pagoda, there was only a burst of light, and Ji-yu took 2 steps back in the blink of an eye, disappearing from the spot. His array covered the entire pagoda. Ji-yu said lightly, "The array has locked on." He walked out of the pagoda in another direction and said to the people beside him, "Everyone, you can retreat now." After Ji-yu's words, they disappeared in an instant. They raised their heads and looked in Ji-yu's direction. At this moment, a few elders walked out. They cupped their hands and said, "Sect leader is really amazing. We are impressed." 2 people from the dragon slaying gang also came forward. "Sect leader, we've found what you need." They respectfully handed a small secret order to Ji-yu. Ji-yu received the name card and disappeared in an instant. After a moment, Ji-yu slowly took a step forward. 18 golden ahats. After hearing Ji-yu's Chinese language, they instantly appeared in the same place and knelt on the ground. They cupped their hands and said to Ji-yu in front of them, "Greetings, young master. Follow me." After Ji-yu's words, they followed behind Ji-yu. After a moment, they followed behind Ji-yu and disappeared in an instant. Ji-yu instantly flew to the pagoda. Ding! The host used the dark forest. Including Ji-yu, a total of 19 figures landed on the trees not far away. They stood in a row on the trees and looked into the huge cave residence. They landed on the ground with a trace of vigilance in their eyes. The Ice Queen's divided soul was in the cave residence. When she saw that there were many people outside the cave residence, she looked up with a trace of vigilance in her eyes. After saying this, he disappeared in an instant. After a moment, he flew in front of Ji-yu. He took out a precious weapon and directly slashed at Ji-yu. Ji-yu slowly raised her hand and directly held the precious weapon in front of her with 2 fingers. "You really came." After saying this, Ji-yu said indifferently, "Not bad. I'm here. Come back with us. I need freedom. I want freedom." The Ice Queen's soul fragments were not weak. They disappeared in an instant. In the next moment, they charged in Ji-yu's direction. Their eyes were filled with killing intent as they charged in Ji-yu's direction. Ji-yu jumped up and flew in front of the Ice Queen. She flew down and directly gathered all the dark force in her palm. In the next moment, the dark force in Ji-yu's palm slammed heavily on the thick gang chi. As Ji-yu's dark force slammed down, it was accompanied by a loud bang. At this moment, a cloud of black fog floated in the sky. Originally, the Ice Queen's divided soul did not have a precious weapon. However, after she killed her way to the sect, she killed all the experts above the elder level of this small sect and even snatched the precious weapon that had been passed down for hundreds of years. After seeing the precious weapon in Ji-yu's hand, the Ice Queen's divided soul's eyes lit up. Her body flashed and she disappeared on the spot. After a moment, she picked up the precious weapon in front of her and grabbed the sword hilt. The Ice Queen directly rushed in the direction of Ji-yu. He leaped 2 to 3 meters into the air. Raging Inferno. Ding. Host used Raging Inferno. Obtained 1 by 999 experience points. Raging flames burst out from the Kuan Peng giant sword, producing 2 balls of fire. They fell like a meteor shower. The balls of fire fell heavily. The Ice Queen's divided soul let out an angry roar and waved the precious weapon in her hand. At this moment, countless ice spikes burst out rapidly. Those ice spikes quickly fell in the direction of Ji-yu. Ji-yu's gang chi covered the front of her. Those ice spikes pierced her gang chi at this time, reducing the impact of the ice spikes by more than half. He waved his 2 fingers in front of him and quickly absorbed the dark force in the icicle with his gang chi. With a wave of his sword finger, the 2 enormous Shen energies collided with each other at this moment. Chapter 689. The huge array floated in the air. Ji-yu glanced at the huge array formation in front of him and instantly disappeared from where he was. Holding the Kuan-Peng giant sword in his hand, he immediately flew up. The formation gradually rippled on the ground, covering the entire ground and slowly spreading out. He jumped up, picked up the giant sword beside him, and charged in Ji Yu's direction. The Kuan-Peng giant sword collided with the other party's hand. There was a huge explosion. There was a loud boom. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared on the spot. The person in front of her looked at Ji Yu in shock, a look of shock on his face. Ji Yu threw the Kuan-Peng giant sword into the sky, and it split into countless giant swords. The power of the Kuan-Peng fell instantly. They all collided with the Queen of Ice's soul. Boom, boom, boom. 3 loud sounds were heard, and smoke floated out. Along with a gentle breeze, it began to move. The thick smoke dispersed, and the human and soul looked at each other. Ji Yu's gaze was deep. His body flashed, and at this moment, he appeared in front of the other party. His gaze was locked on Ji Yu's direction. The Queen of Ice didn't understand why this human kept chasing after her. Ji Yu summoned the soul in the spirit rope and said calmly, "Your soul seems to be eager for freedom. So what? Without her, I can't recover." The spirit rope was protesting violently. In an instant, he disappeared from his spot. In the next moment, the treasure weapon in his hand collided with the treasure weapon of the other party. Along with a cracking sound, the treasure weapon emitted a cracking sound. In an instant, the treasure turned into fragments. At this moment, the fragments floated up and exploded in an instant. At this moment, the fragments quickly fell in Ji Yu's direction. Ji Yu raised his hand. The fiery battle robe on his body fluttered without wind and floated up. With a fierce cloak of fire, Ji Yu disappeared on the spot. A moment later, he raised the treasure in his hand and swung it down heavily. The 2 treasures collided in an instant. There was a violent explosion in the surroundings. Whether it was Ji Yu or the Queen of Ice's people, in an instant, there was a cracking sound. The moment the 2 Xian energies clashed, a crackling sound could be heard. The surrounding lightning bolts fell to the side and ignited the flames in an instant. At this moment, the raging flames started to burn towards the surroundings. The entire forest was set ablaze. At this moment, the entire cave was turned into ashes. Ji Yu landed on the ground and looked in front of him. He instantly disappeared on the spot and pulled out the treasure. The Queen of Ice's soul didn't expect Ji Yu to be so powerful. 2 bursts of profound strength erupted in an instant, and the enormous profound strength slowly collided at this moment. Accompanied by the sound of the explosion, they gradually fell. Ji Yu flew up and said indifferently, "If you don't make a move, she will run away again." The Queen of Ice flew out and then put on a violent demonstration of hitting herself. Ji Yu didn't care so much. Taking the opportunity, he pulled out the Queen of Ice's soul and injected her soul into the other party. He stood up and glanced in front of him. Ji Yu turned around and flew out of the spot in the blink of an eye. He directly slapped the other party's body. At this moment, the soul in the other party's body pulled out her consciousness and injected the soul into a small treasure. If there was a chance in the future, he would find a suitable soul for her. After losing her consciousness, the Queen of Ice's soul was similar to the other souls. They were only left with the instinct to fight. Their eyes were fixed on Ji Yu. Kill, kill, kill. Only the sound of killing was left. She floated her body and came in front of Ji Yu. She raised her hand and waved the treasure weapon at the Queen of Ice's body. However, the Queen of Ice didn't have a physical body at the moment. She wouldn't be hurt by this sword at all. Ji Yu turned around and took out 5 treasures from his storage ring. These treasures were used to store souls, and he began to absorb the Xian energy from them. He shot out his spiritual power in an instant. The mental strength wrapped around the other party's body and locked it tightly. The bones in the other party's body were constantly breaking and he let out a series of screams. At this moment, all the Xian qi in her body was injected into the Queen of Ice's body. After absorbing the Queen of Ice's soul, she revealed a smile like a young girl. She smiled faintly and said, "I didn't expect that I would still be unable to recover after obtaining the power of 3 souls. Perhaps I can only obtain that power in the main hall of the Hall of Evolution." But I'm afraid that I won't be able to defeat her. After thousands of years, the power of the third soul has developed intelligence. I'm afraid that something bad will happen in the future. After saying this, Ji Yu turned around and said coldly, "So what? You're afraid of yourself. I'm here." The Queen of Ice picked him up like a little girl and kissed him. It wasn't her fault because Ji Yu knew very well that in her heart, Ji Yu turned around and disappeared instantly. He said faintly, "Aren't you the high and mighty Queen of Ice? There's no other way. I've taken back my soul. That's it. It'll take some time for her to integrate into my main personality." Hearing this, the corners of Ji Yu's lips curled up in a helpless smile. The dark forest appeared once again as a human and a soul flew out continuously. The matter here was considered to have come to an end. Ji Yu stood up and said faintly, "Let's go to the north and take back your last soul." Riding on the horse, he quickly drove the horse and galloped forward. Not long after, they arrived at the border. Ji Yu pulled on the reins in her hand and looked at the border. Countless flames and thick smoke were rising from the huge city walls. Along with the black smoke, they flew up continuously. Countless people riding on Xian beasts came to the front of the border. The great general of the southern region rode on his horse and kept neighing. Chapter 690. The southern region great general pulled on the reins in his hand, and his horse neighed. Along with the neighing, an army of cultivators slowly walked out and stood at the foot of the city walls. A young man in white stood on top of the city walls. He stared coldly at the foot of the city walls. Along with the sound of drums, rows of soldiers slowly walked forward. He raised his hand high into the air. Loud rumbling sounds could be heard. Countless spears flew out at the same time. Dark energy was infused into the spears and they struck the city walls. The city walls were about to collapse. The young man in white on top of the city walls raised his hand high. In the next moment, his energy covered the city walls. He was able to gather the energy of so many people and convert it into his own energy. In the next instant, they turned their heads around and saw that the streams of astral energy were gradually descending and blocking the city walls. Suddenly, the city walls began to collapse. Ji Yu turned around. He slowly took a step forward. He had to enter the city, no matter what. The southern region great general didn't seem to have many tricks up his sleeve. After the first wave of spears, they all struck the city walls. The spears fell into the energy and fell to the ground. He wasn't too anxious. He raised the spear in his hand and shouted, "Follow me." After shouting those words, they swarmed forward. They came under the aura chi. Although they had gathered powerful aura chi, they lifted it up and waved it out at the same time. After the heavy impact, a crack appeared on the city walls. The energy shattered into pieces at this moment. Whooshing sounds could be heard as they rode their mystical beasts to the foot of the city walls. The mystical beasts used their claws to grab hold of the city walls and climbed up to land on the city walls. They landed on the city walls and pulled out their weapons. Loud explosions could be heard from the energy. The young men in white on top of the city walls raised their hands. With a wave of their hands, the young men on top of the city walls ran forward and jumped to the ground. They raised their hands and pointed their swords at the southern region soldiers. After shouting "Kill!", the soldiers from both sides were entangled with each other, and the ground was littered with corpses in a pool of blood. Ji Yu took a step forward, and the majority of the people here were using mystical skills. Her entire body flashed and disappeared from her original position. After a moment, Ji Yu released her mystical skill, and with a boom, she shot out explosively. He waved his hand forward. Ding, the host used Raging Inferno, and gained 1 by 999 experience points. Ji Yu disappeared from his spot. He turned around and slowly took a step forward. A treasure appeared in his hand as he waved his sword. The Kuan Peng's artifact spirit flew up. A ball of fire emerged from the fire and sprayed into the Gang Chi. The flame seemed to have the power to never be extinguished. The white-robed young man looked in the direction of Ji Yu as he devoured the earth energy around him. Why is this fellow targeting my faction? Who exactly was he? The people from the southern region were also very surprised. Why would a profound realm expert appear? Ji Yu slowly took a step forward and waved the Kuan-Peng giant sword in his hand. Suddenly, the Kuan-Peng giant sword in his hand shot out flames once again. The flames burned on top of the city walls. The city walls were burned red by the flames and gradually melted. When they saw this, the people around them all rushed forward. They rode their Xian beasts and slowly advanced forward. When the southern region's great general saw that the city walls had collapsed, he was overjoyed. He roared out in joy, "Kill!" After roaring this sentence, they rushed into the city walls. The Xian cultivators inside the city walls were simply watching the show. They didn't care who became the king. The corners of their mouths curled into a smile. Under the roar of "Kill!" another group of people rushed out. This was the last protective force in the city. If this group of people couldn't expel them, they could only fall in a pool of blood. The people from the southern region rushed forward. They raised the weapons in their hands and chopped at the necks of their opponents. A stream of blood flowed out from their necks. They disappeared on the spot. The people from both sides jumped down to the bottom of the city walls. They raised their hands and charged towards the people inside the city walls. A sea of blood could be called a sea of blood. The people on both sides stood in the tall city towers and watched everything. Ji Yu also took this opportunity to jump onto a mystical beast. She followed the mystical beasts and rushed into the city walls. When the soldiers saw Ji Yu, they also rushed in. They all rushed in the direction of Ji Yu. He grasped the weapon beside him and jumped up. He looked at the people who were charging towards him and waved the weapon in his hand. Along with the explosion of Xian energy, the two of them each took a step back. Ji Yu turned around and waved her weapon heavily. Boom! A loud sound rang out. They were sent flying. A few soldiers raised their hands and charged towards Ji Yu. Ji Yu turned around and stabbed her sword in their direction. Ji Yu picked up the weapon in her hand and suddenly turned around. She slashed the weapon in her hand across the necks of those soldiers. Blood immediately flowed to the ground. The people from the southern region followed Ji Yu into the city walls and locked their gazes on Ji Yu. The southern region's generals didn't know who this person was, but since he appeared here and had such a powerful force, he was definitely not an ordinary person. They shouted loudly, "Kill!" After shouting out these words, the two groups of people began to fight. The southern region's general walked in front of Ji Yu and cupped his hands. He said politely, "Everyone, we will protect him and retreat." After shouting these words, everyone ran forward. A few people stood in front of Ji Yu and protected her. Under the attack of the flames blocked the earth energy. Gradually, the flames started to spread in all directions. Ji Yu wanted to block the attacks, but she didn't expect them to use their lives to block Ji Yu's flames. Ji Yu said calmly, "You?" When the southern region's general heard Ji Yu's words, he said, "Young man, this battle is our business. It has nothing to do with you. Hurry up and retreat." Chapter 691. The southern region soldiers charged forward and blocked Ji Yu with their swords. Ji Yu said calmly, "I am Ji Yu." "What?" Everyone was stunned when they heard Ji Yu's name. Wasn't this the Queen of the Southern Region? They looked guilty when they heard the name of the Queen of the Southern Region. "Reporting to my king, we have already lost 7 or 8 generals here. Many of them were even founding generals." Ji Yu was curious. Is there anyone in the northern region who can stop the Southwest Alliance? There was a hint of doubt in his voice. The southern region general lowered his head in embarrassment. They had been victorious all this time. However, countless experts from the northern region had appeared and killed their leaders. That was how they ended up in this predicament. Hearing that there was such an expert in the northern region, even he showed a trace of doubt on his face. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Impossible." Ji Yu's words were filled with extreme fury. They jumped off their horses and knelt on the ground, cupping their fists in salute. "Your Majesty, we didn't want this to happen either. However, they are too powerful. When they heard this, they cracked their whips and ran forward. They surrounded Ji-yu. With Ji-yu around, they felt that they had a chance of winning. After this thought appeared in his mind, Yi-Zichen smiled. They looked at Ji-yu with hope in their eyes. Ji-yu raised his weapon and said, "Kill." After shouting these words, he waved his horsewhip and charged forward. When Ji-yu saw this, he jumped up and stood on his mystical beast. As the mystical beast approached Ji-yu, he suddenly opened his eyes. He swung his sword. There was a flash of light and the people in front of him parted. Those people fell to the ground one after another. They spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated 2 steps. Blood splattered on the ground. A row of soldiers stepped forward with spears in their hands. The white-robed young man stepped forward. A gust of wind blew. Ji-yu said calmly, "I am the queen of the southern region. Tell me your name." The other party suddenly burst out laughing. "Queen of the southern region? If you die here, you won't be the queen of the southern region anymore. Dead people don't need to remember my name." He waved his hand, and the rest of the people also ran forward at this moment. They all held treasured spears in their hands. They all turned around and waved their treasured weapons. Ji-yu waved the treasured weapon in his hand. There was a clang. The 2 treasures collided with each other. After a ding sound, the 2 of them separated. Ji-yu sensed that the other party was also at LV5 human profound realm. They fixed their gazes on Ji-yu. He said slowly, "Queen of the southern region, I heard that your name is Ji-yu. Didn't you say that dead people don't need to remember your name? Let me return that to you. Dead people don't need to remember my name. You're boasting shamelessly." The white-robed young man shouted. The 15 people beside him, clad in golden armor, slapped their horses and rushed forward. He held a spear in his hand and stabbed it in Ji-yu's direction. Ji-yu raised his hand and grabbed the spear in front of him. Grabbing the spear in front of him, Ji-yu bent his hand slightly and broke the spear in front of him. The spear broke in an instant. He picked up the spear in front of him and swung it in Ji-yu's direction. He dodged the iron spear in front of him. In the blink of an eye, he swung his Kuan Peng sword. Ji-yu's eyes turned cold. He turned around and swung his body. The leader of the 15 people slashed his sword in Ji-yu's direction. Ji-yu turned around and swung his sword forward. The 2 huge swords collided. There was a clang, and the 2 of them retreated. He fixed his eyes on his opponent and disappeared in an instant. The general didn't expect that he couldn't even withstand one of Ji-yu's attacks. The young man in white snorted, "Ji-yu, let's see how you're going to die this time." After shouting this, the people around them disappeared in an instant. After a while, they appeared beside Ji-yu and surrounded him. Suddenly, there was an angry roar in the air. There was a roar in the sky. "Get lost." After hearing the word "get lost," the crowd in front of him slowly retreated. They fixed their eyes on the blue sky behind Ji-yu. In the air, a young girl wearing a long black muslin dress was taking small steps in the air and arriving in front of Ji-yu. Xiao Ji-yu landed behind Ji-yu. When Xiao Ji-yu appeared just now, everyone in front of her felt a sense of fear. They all took 2 steps back. Ji-yu said indifferently, "Xiao Ji-yu, come behind me." After shouting this, Xiao Ji-yu looked at Ji-yu gently. Ji-yu's strength was rapidly increasing, and so was her strength. Xiao Ji-yu, mystic skill, fairy flying heaven. This was the mystic skill that Ji-yu found in Xiao Gu's family. The 2 of them merged together and flew together. Their gazes met at this moment. Those 15 people flew up at the same time with treasures in their hands. They slowly landed in Ji-yu's direction. Those treasures landed in Ji-yu's direction. After a huge explosion, Ji-yu's body flashed and turned around. She turned around and stabbed her sword heavily. The 2 of them looked at each other. When their eyes met, their gazes connected with each other. After landing on the ground, Ji-yu raised her head and picked up that treasured weapon. At this moment, the white-clothed youth charged towards Ji-yu and Xiao Ji-yu. From the time she met Xiao Ji-yu until now, Ji-yu had only seen her attack once. That was when she didn't have any opponents. A thick black fog flew out from her hand. The white-clothed youth snorted. After dispersing the fog, Ji figure appeared behind the fog. Her treasured weapon directly slashed down. The white-clothed youth widened his eyes. Chapter 692. The white-clothed youth had never expected Xiao Jiyu to be so powerful. In fact, even Jiyu was puzzled. When she had parted ways with Xiao Jiyu, this girl was only at the second level of the human profound realm. How did she become so much stronger now? However, it could be said that Xiao Gu's childishness from before had completely disappeared. She was like a queen standing high on a mountain peak, looking down on all living things. Xiao Jiyu said indifferently, "I received my mother's inheritance." No wonder, Jiyu thought to herself. At the same time, her body flashed, and she appeared in front of the white-clothed youth. "Brat, let's spar?" When he heard Jiyu's words, he was puzzled. How dare a brat like you challenge me? This was an insult to their family's existence. Thus, he roared and disappeared from his original spot. A moment later, he appeared in front of Jiyu. He was holding a long sword in his hand. He looked coldly at Jiyu in front of him and said indifferently, "Jiyu, today, I will definitely kill you in this North Desert city. How can I allow you to cause trouble in my western region?" After shouting this, the long spear in his hand flew in front of Jiyu like a dragon. She dodged the attack of the long spear. His body flashed, and the huge Kuan-Peng sword in his hand could no longer be held back. However, Jiyu was no longer the Jiyu of the past. The 18 golden arhats would not allow anyone to attack their master in front of them. Furthermore, Jiyu couldn't possibly put these people who had already gained sentience into his storage ring, right? They stood in front of Jiyu and swung their swords. With a loud bang, the light suddenly exploded. The surroundings were illuminated by a white light. The white-clothed youth was forced to retreat by this white light. He looked in Jiyu's direction with an ominous glint in his eyes. His expression was as if he wanted to eat Jiyu. Fighting with more people against fewer people, is this how profound practitioners fight? Jiyu couldn't help but laugh out loud. Just now, your side didn't lose out to my 18 people. You are shameless. All members of the Zhu clan, listen to my orders. We will give up on North Desert City, but we must kill this brat. Suddenly, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The young man in white pointed at Jiyu and said, "The army is here. You're lucky. We'll meet another day." With a flash of light, he disappeared from the land. It was actually a spatial profound skill. The southern region's general patted his Shen beast and ran over to Jiyu. "Hurry up and give chase. My king is here, so there's no need to be afraid today." Jiyu said slowly, "You don't have to chase him anymore. Why is your majesty doing this?" Jiyu laughed out loud. They used a spatial profound skill and are already far away from North Desert City. "Generals, follow this empress to the city lord's residence and report to me about the battle." Jiyu sat on the seat of the city lord's residence. 8 generals knelt in front of her. They were the only ones left from the battle at the border. Their faces were full of shame. Jiyu asked coldly, "What is going on?" They looked at each other and said respectfully, "Reporting to my king, we encountered great resistance during the battle. We are already very lucky to have so many people left." "The union of 10,000 immortals?" "That's right. So that white-clothed youth was one of them. No wonder. This was the reason why they had been obstructing Jiyu. No one wanted to see the 4 regions united because it would be difficult for the union of 10,000 immortals to rule the mortal world. However, this was too ridiculous. Jiyu snorted coldly. She stood up and a smile appeared on her face. She would leave the mortal world's affairs to the rainbow heavenly snake in the future. She had more ambitious goals. The generals under her were all afraid of Jiyu. They were afraid that her wrath would descend from the sky. That was something they couldn't bear. Jiyu turned around and a smile appeared on her face. "Everyone, you've put everything into the southern region's grand plan. How could this king blame you? It's just the western region. My sons, will you follow this king to traverse the world?" The generals were overjoyed and kowtowed. The next day, The army was reorganized. A total of 100,000 profound practitioners dressed in battle armor and armed with profound crossbows approached Chenyuan City. When the king of the Western region received this news, he immediately mobilized his army of profound practitioners to fight Gu. Only victory was allowed in this battle. This was the only thing he could rely on. The profound beasts seemed to have sensed the determination in the hearts of the profound practitioners. They stood on top of the city walls. Along with the sound of drums, the gates of Chenyuan City slowly opened. The king of the Western region's subordinate, Qiu Wudi, led the army of profound practitioners and led the charge. The southern region's general raised the 7th grade artifact in his hand. First round, fire. His voice covered the entire battlefield. Countless profound crossbows let out a deafening sound. The profound arrows carried the profound energy of their masters and rained down like rain. The profound beasts of the Western region were pierced through the chest by arrows that were over 7 inches long. They fell to the ground and continuously waved their claws as if they wanted to tear apart the enemies in front of them. Jiyu shouted, "Kill!" The 18 golden arhats took the lead in charging. "This general is going." Below Qiu Wudi, an azure-robed general roared. He slapped the giant lion of the northern region beneath him and quickly leaped forward. Overlord Spear. A spear that glowed with azure light suddenly appeared in his hand. He exchanged a single blow with the 18 golden arhats. In an instant, it was as if the heavens and earth changed color. The spear shattered. He never expected that he would be defeated in a single blow. The cyan-robed general roared and stabbed one of the golden arhats with his broken spear. That golden arhat immediately fell to the ground, although he had an immortal body. Although he was immortal, he was restrained by the artifact and couldn't move. Ha ha ha, that hurts. Suddenly, he was stunned. The artifact in the other golden arhat's hands had pierced through his heart and lungs. Even with the protection of his energy, there was no future for him. Blood flowed out of his mouth. This was the outcome of the first round. Qiu Wudi didn't waste any time. Fire. The sky was once again filled with arrows. Like falling meteors, the 18 golden arhats were pinned to the ground by the arrows no matter how fast they were. The southern region's general's face was as red as a pig's liver. "Thief, you don't have any morals." He glanced at Jiyu, and Jiyu nodded. "Brothers, follow me and kill." In such a large-scale battle, even profound practitioners were no different from mortals. The two armies each used their own profound skills, and their profound energy clashed together. It was as if it was a giant man-eating beast. The first two sides to collide were unable to find any corpses. Only blood was left on the ground. However, this didn't affect the soldiers behind them from continuing to kill. With the support of Jiyu's formation, the southern region's cultivators had become extremely powerful. In just a few rounds, corpses were piled up on the battlefield. The smell of blood permeated the entire battlefield. After 5 rounds, only a few young generals and 5 or 6 soldiers were left behind Qiu Wudi. They knelt in front of Qiu Wudi. "We're leaving. You guys go first. I'll be right behind you." After saying this, those young generals rushed forward. Jiyu raised his hand and raised it up high. The southern region generals stared at Jiyu. Jiyu calmly waved her hand. The great generals of the southern region charged forward and locked themselves in a stalemate. One by one, the generals were swallowed up by the opponent's mystic techniques. Qiu Wudi was the only one left. He drew his precious artifact, patted the mystic beast beneath him, and charged forward. The generals were no match for him at all. When they saw that their generals were dead, countless cultivators swarmed toward Qiu Wudi like ants. True to his name, Qiu Wudi wielded his silver spear, which was imbued with the power of lightning. Countless bolts of lightning reaped the lives of the southern region's men. The corpses on the ground were like a small mountain. Qiu Wudi stood on top of the mountain of corpses and looked in Jiyu's direction. He laughed loudly. "Jiyu, do you dare to stand with me?" Qiu Wudi couldn't retreat. He was the last line of defense for the Western region. Even if he had to die, he had to stop Jiyu. Ji frowned and slowly stepped into the battlefield. He didn't ride his mystic beast. Instead, he coldly reaped the lives of the frenzied soldiers. Qiu Wudi moved as well. After his fifth charge, there were no longer any soldiers behind him. The two of them leaped into the air at the same time. The weapons in their hands clashed, and a loud boom resounded. Ji and Qiu Wudi retreated at the same time. The two of them stood on the sand. The Kuan-Peng sword in Ji's hand was trembling incessantly, as if it had finally found a person it could fight wantonly. Qiu Wudi roared angrily. As soon as the long spear was drawn, the power of thunder and lightning danced in front of Ji like a thunder snake. Ji turned around and swung her sword. The rock's power collided with the serpent of lightning. The surrounding walls trembled violently. Who knew how many heavenly treasures had been used to build the walls, but at this moment, they collapsed. He looked at the person in front of him and ran forward. He stabbed the huge Kuan-Peng sword into the other party's hand. In pain, Qiu Wudi's spear fell to the ground. Surrender. Ha 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 ha, Ji, this old man is useless. I can't kill you. I can die and be dismembered by you, but I can't surrender. After saying this, he closed his eyes. Ji understood his intentions. He put away his giant sword. The soldiers of the southern mountain range all rushed forward. Kill. After shouting this, countless spears pierced through Qiu Wudi's chest. Chapter 693. Qiu Wudi was lying in a pool of blood, which meant that he was dead. Blood flowed all over the ground. Ji stood up and slowly walked out of the city with a life treasure in hand. Suddenly, the sound of thunder filled the air. Countless people walked into the main hall and knelt down. Reporting to Her Majesty, we have found their location. Ji nodded and led the crowd to a small gate. They saw a house floating high in the air. Locked inside were the treasures they had accumulated. The door slowly opened and the soldiers of the southern region walked in. Their eyes lit up. There were so many treasures. They were like madmen as they rushed towards the pile of treasures. They put away the gold coins in front of them. Everyone walked out with a smile on their faces. At this time, they slowly walked out of the door with countless life treasures appearing on their bodies. The northern region's soldiers arrived one after another. However, when they saw the southern region's soldiers, their hearts trembled slightly. They didn't want to die here. Hence, they put away their weapons, turned around, and walked in another direction. Following the sound of the bugle horn, everyone gathered in the middle of the square. Of the four regions, only the western region was still bitterly holding on. The western region's stubborn strength had defeated the allied forces of the other three regions. Ji was surprised. Their cries rang out and the surrounding soldiers stood up. They held treasures in their hands and stepped out. They raised their treasures and charged towards the capital city. The Western region capital city was a huge city of steel. They used their dark force to build this sturdy city wall. At that moment, a huge explosion sounded. Countless balls of dark force of various colors danced in the sky and fell from the sky. The flames burned on the dark iron city wall. It was as if there was a scorching flame that completely melted the surrounding dark iron. However, no one was able to block that move. When Ji saw the countless flames, he opened his eyes abruptly and raised the Kuan-Peng greatsword in his hand. Kill. The battlefield stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Ji's voice rang out in the sky. As his voice fell, everyone charged out one after another. When Ji saw this, she immediately flew into the sky. When they heard Ji's words, which were filled with the word kill, they were so scared that their bodies started to tremble. The word kill resounded through the sky, and at this moment, everyone rushed forward to kill. Ji landed in the crowd. The artifact spirit trembled in excitement. Opening its mouth, it sucked in all the souls around it. Ji's figure suddenly flashed and vanished on the spot. In the blink of an eye, she appeared behind another group of Profoundus, and then she swung the enormous rock sword down, causing them to fall into pools of blood. The king of the western region closed his eyes in despair when he saw so many people lying in a pool of blood. It's done, he said flatly. My lord, you can't surrender. After shouting this, they turned around and saw that Ji had disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of everyone. The king of the western region stood on the mountain and said flatly, Who are you? Ji. Ji was the king of the southern region. How could the king of the western region not know who her opponent was? When he thought of this, he disappeared on the spot. Holding the artifact in his hand, he slashed it in Ji's direction. He looked at Ji calmly and said, If I can withstand 10 of your attacks, I beg you not to kill my subjects. What do you think? After saying this, Ji closed her eyes and nodded. A white light flashed. Ding. Host used the lightning serpent's path. You have gained 1 by 999 experience points. The lightning serpent exploded in the air and turned into dozens of rays of white light. In an instant, it scattered into the surroundings and turned into specks of light that flew towards the king of the western region. The king of the western region's mouth fell open. His mouth fell open. What? As soon as he said this, a stream of energy enveloped his body. Ji turned around and brandished the treasure in his hand. After slashing down, the king of the western region's protective energy enveloped him. The lightning serpents collided with the stellar energy. Boom, boom, boom. With 3 loud booms, a cloud of smoke covered the entire area. However, the protective energy on his body was too weak. There was no way he could get close to the king of the western region's protective energy. After the lightning serpents collided with the king of the western region's protective energy, they turned into pieces and fell into the sea of blood. As they fell to the ground, Ji slowly stepped forward. She said flatly, Everyone, come on up. After Ji said this, the king of the western region slowly took a step back. At this moment, the king of the western region lowered his head. Ji disappeared in a flash. He said flatly, From today onwards, you are my subjects. After Ji said this, the surrounding people lowered their heads. The king of the western region was seriously injured. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Ji said flatly, From today onwards, you will plant the seedlings in the fields. Those who have cultivated well can be sent to the southern region. They will not be much different from ordinary people. After shouting this sentence, the surrounding people cheered one after another. They were very excited to be able to live like ordinary people. Ji walked into the palace of the western region and started flipping through the books. When he saw the books, his lips curled into a smile. After smiling, Ji walked out of the door. He disappeared on the spot and drew out his long sword. In the blink of an eye, he slashed down. With a flash of silver light, he disappeared on the spot and stretched out his sword fingers. He directly cut the precious weapon in front of him in half. He slapped the king of the western region's body with his palm. With a loud explosion, the king of the western region spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Ji said flatly, Kill. After shouting this sentence, a ray of white light appeared in front of him. Chapter 694. After the white light fell, he said faintly, Who are you? As soon as Ji's voice fell, he looked out. Ha ha ha, how can a villain like you be allowed to enter the royal family's territory? There was a trace of vigilance in the corner of his eyes. A white-haired old man walked out slowly with a smile on his face. After seeing Ji, he flew forward and attacked Ji. Ji turned around and waved her sword. The two sounds collided at this moment. After the sound of the explosion subsided, the two of them fell backwards. He stood on the ground and saw a cloud of smoke blowing slowly toward him. At this moment, the white-haired old man waved his long sleeve and disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Ji. Ji turned around and waved her hand heavily. The two palms collided at this moment. After the smoke dispersed, they flew out and stood in the middle of the stone room. At this moment, he looked in the direction of Ji. He said lightly, Boy, you're so capable. Ji said lightly, Your king is dead. Do you want to surrender? After hearing Ji's words, he gritted his teeth. At this moment, Gragula's voice slowly sounded. He disappeared on the spot at this moment. The treasures collided at this moment. The two of them landed on the ground and looked at each other at this moment. Ji-yu said lightly, "Old man, you're quite strong. Let me take over your body." After shouting this sentence, Ji-yu's consciousness flew out at this moment. Her spiritual power directly entered the old man's mind. The old man screamed. Ji-yu flew over and slapped down heavily. Immediately, the soul in his body flew out at this moment. He let out a blood-curdling scream. Ji-yu's palm released a huge suction force. At this moment, a huge suction force was produced and sucked. At this moment, the old man's soul flew out. Ji-yu used her spiritual power and destroyed the old man in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. He slowly took a step forward. At this moment, the sound of explosions slowly spread out from the surroundings. He quickly waved the treasured weapon in his hand forward. The surrounding balls of light fell one after another. Ji-yu flew forward and directly forced the surrounding people into the old man's body. He opened his eyes and said faintly, "Keep." After saying this, they looked at each other and instantly disappeared on the spot. He pulled out his treasured weapon and directly waved his sword. In the blink of an eye, his long sword fell. There was a loud bang. At this moment, the light slowly fell and his figure disappeared on the spot. Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, he flew out and said lightly, "Everyone, stand down." The southern region's great general cupped his fists and retreated. He directly summoned the corpse. In an instant, the corpse was absorbed into Ji-yu's hand. At this moment, Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, he said lightly, "I've done what I promised you." After Ji-yu said this, the light suddenly became bigger. Suddenly, the ball of light slowly floated up. He said indifferently, "Kill." After shouting this sentence, he disappeared on the spot. Ji-yu held the treasured weapon and in the next moment, they all closed in on Ji-yu. He turned around and waved the treasured weapon. There was a loud bang. In the next moment, he slowly floated up and disappeared on the spot. The Ice Queen's soul instantly entered the body. It was slowly merging with the corpse. In the next moment, the corpse gradually changed into the appearance of a young girl. Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, he disappeared on the spot. Ji-yu slowly took 2 steps forward. The Ice Queen's soul looked at her body happily. She looked in the direction of Ji-yu and hugged Ji-yu, saying lightly, "Thank you." Ji-yu nodded. Then, he disappeared on the spot. "I'll be called Chingru from now on. Don't forget me." Ji-yu disappeared on the spot and stepped into the sky. Just now, when he was fighting with the old man, Ji-yu sensed a fluctuation in the floating light. In the next moment, a crack appeared in the sky. He saw that the crack was collapsing. He directly entered the crack and disappeared on the spot. In the next second, he appeared in a world of ice and snow. He said lightly, "The extreme north, I'm back." The Ice Queen's afterimage appeared beside Ji-yu. She floated beside Ji-yu. Ji-yu said slowly, "Let's go." After saying this, the wind was strong. In the next moment, a strong wind blew. He turned around and waved the long sword. It was accompanied by a sound of explosion. In the blink of an eye, the surrounding flames spread out and melted all the surrounding ice and snow. Ji-yu held the treasured weapon and disappeared on the spot in an instant. In the next second, the Kuan-Peng giant sword was waved out in an instant. In the next moment, there was a huge explosion. At this moment, the huge ice block fell quickly. Seeing the huge ice block, Ji-yu disappeared on the spot. He picked up the giant sword in his hand and waved it out in an instant. At this moment, he disappeared on the spot. He slowly took a step forward and said indifferently, "Kill." After he shouted this, the pagoda in front of him started shaking violently. The evolution temple had actually been abandoned. The stone statue of the Ice Queen stood tall in front of the two of them. He raised his head and said indifferently, "Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, the treasure instantly exploded on the stone statue. Chapter 695. After falling, Ji-yu suddenly turned around. He looked out of the window. There was still a white light in the direction of the evolving temple. It was as if there was an illusory figure floating in the air. He laughed out loud. Who has the guts to break into our evolving temple? After hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Ji Yu took a step forward and said indifferently, "Look who this is." Only then did the remnant soul appear beside Ji Yu. After seeing the icebound queen, the white-haired old man revealed a look of surprise. "Icebound queen? Is that you?" There was a look of surprise on his face. Ji Yu nodded. A hint of excitement flashed in the Queen of Ice's eyes. With this phantom, she could return to a more powerful state. Ji Yu slowly walked through the gate. Only a white light could be seen flashing. The three of them came to the evolving temple. Sensing the arrival of Ji Yu and the others, the icebound queen's stone statue gradually shattered. A figure appeared in front of the three of them. Ji Yu said indifferently, "This is your clone." The remnant soul came in front of the remnant soul and stretched out its hand. This remnant soul without any consciousness directly entered her body. Only then did she recover her consciousness. "My power has recovered a lot. Now I can open the gate to the central region. Are you ready? Even though you are so strong, you are still the lowest existence in the central region." Ji Yu smiled, "No problem." Seeing Ji Yu so confident, the icebound queen took 2 steps forward and gathered power in her hands. The colors in the sky kept changing. Several rainbows suddenly lit up, and several rays of light gathered in the sky at this time. They gradually shattered. It was as if a divine light was injected into the ground. Ji Yu slowly walked forward. Under the injection of the divine light, Ji Yu disappeared. He summoned the remnant soul but couldn't see her. In his mind, the remnant soul's voice sounded. "I will hide in your body until we find the evolving temple." Ji Yu raised his head and took 2 steps forward. An old man walked over and touched his white beard. He asked Ji Yu, "Young man, who are you?" "This is Zhongshin village. We haven't seen outsiders for many years." Ji Yu cupped his hands. "Old man, I am Ji Yu. Do you know where the evolving temple is?" "Haha, who doesn't know the evolving temple in the central region? It is the most evil existence. Young man, don't look for them." The old man seemed to think of something and gradually described it to Ji Yu. It turned out that all these years, the remaining people of the evolving temple had been capturing young children and cruelly imprisoning them. As for the whereabouts of those children, no one knew. They felt that those people had died long ago. The central region was gradually divided into 3 empires. The 3 empires were all conquering the evolving temple. However, the evolving temple was too powerful. They were all defeated quickly. The 3 empires that came after were only the remnants of the evil. Ji Yu thanked the old man. When he passed through the light pillar, his sky-splitting sword started operating quickly for some reason. Now, it was almost at the level of breaking through. The old man took out some food. Just as he was about to treat Ji Yu to the delicacies, a loud commotion suddenly came from the direction of the village entrance. Ji Yu turned around. He looked outside the door and didn't know what was going on. He only saw a group of armored soldiers say faintly, "Old man, don't force us. Hand over your family's magnetite and food. Otherwise, we will kill without mercy." The few old men were trembling. "Sir, you just came a few days ago. How can we have any food? How dare you? Get away from me." An old man was about to hug the officer's leg and cry. This was the ultimate killing move of poor people like them. Ji Yu frowned and saw them fly up. A whip was about to land on one of the old men. Ji Yu's figure flashed and disappeared. A moment later, he appeared in front of the old man. He raised his hand and directly caught the whip. He directly pulled him to the ground. His body was dripping with blood. He panted and said, "Kill him, kill him." The 2 men shouted. The 2 men behind the officer flew up. A yellow spear appeared in each of their hands. A red light appeared in the spear. Ji Yu took a step back with the old man. The 2 red lights directly hit Ji Yu's gangchi. With a loud bang, Ji Yu disappeared on the spot. He waved the precious weapon in his hand. The huge power of the Kuan Peng flew out of the weapon spirit and directly swallowed their souls. They never expected that all the guards would be killed. The remaining officials pointed at Jiyu in front of them and said, "Good, good, good. You wait for me." After saying this, they turned around and ran out. Those old men sighed. They said to Jiyu, "They are here to collect taxes. We have to leave this village." Jiyu asked, "Where do you plan to go?" "We don't know. We are old. We will go as far as we can." Seeing the despair on their faces, Jiyu knew that he was the one who had harmed them. He said calmly, "If that's the case, it's my fault. I'll let you continue living in this village." After saying this, Jiyu ran out quickly. Ding! The host used the 3000 volts lightning and gained one by 999 experience points. Jiyu's figure was so strong that he could travel thousands of miles in a day. However, he didn't choose to go so far away. Instead, he ran to a small town not far from this village. There was a small wall in this town. There was a small purple flag on the wall. There was also a ferocious tiger on it. Jiyu took 2 steps forward and said lightly to the person in front of him, "Hello, may I ask if the jurisdiction of Xinping village is here?" The man raised his head in confusion. "There are still people alive in this village?" Jiyu had already obtained her answer. She left behind a gold coin and said thank you. The guard scratched his head. "There were so many strange people today. Sir City Lord, you have to believe me. That guy is way too arrogant. The people we sent out have all died, and they all died miserably." After hearing this, he frowned. He said, "I don't care who he is. He dares to go against the will of our Star Soul nation. He is simply courting death." After saying this, the 2 youths walked out. "The person you met should be a Xian cultivator. Against a Xian cultivator, we should let the people from Star Xian Palace take action." That's right. I will leave it to the 2 of you." At this moment, a few guards burst in and hit the stone wall. They turned around and locked their eyes on Jiyu. Their eyes were filled with resentment. They asked Jiyu in front of them, "Kid, you have big guts." The lackey who survived in Xinping village nervously pointed at Jiyu and shouted, "It's him, it's him." After shouting this, Jiyu took 2 steps forward and grabbed the other party's neck, lifting him up high. He threw him out. The 2 youths in green robes said, "You dare to be so arrogant in front of us. You don't put our Xingxuan brother in your eyes." Xian's skill, starlight flicker. An incomparably strong white light appeared in the sky. Jiyu couldn't see anything in front of him, but his mental strength covered the surroundings. What made Jiyu surprised was that their Xian skill could directly seal off his mental strength. He disappeared from where he was and turned around. Then, he swung the axe at Jiyu's head. As he turned around, the 2 precious weapons collided with each other at high speed. The small mayor's mansion collapsed in an instant. The 2 of them had also entered the 4th level of the human profound realm. They bent down and locked their gazes on Jiyu. Xing Han arrived in front of and behind Jiyu at an incomparably fast speed. At the same time, they held their weapons and locked onto Jiyu's back. They directly stabbed the 2 spears into Jiyu's body. Ding! The host has used Raging Inferno. The 2 balls of flames slowly shot out from both sides. The flames burned everyone's bodies. Both of them were covered in flames. They slapped the table on the ground. The table instantly broke into pieces. Such strong Xian Qi. Damn it, my robes have been burned clean. This brat is too strong. We can only use that move. But big brother, we can't live after using that move. If we can't live, then so be it. After saying these 2 sentences, they put their hands together. Suddenly, a ray of light shone brightly. The 2 of them instantly disappeared from their original positions. In an instant, they appeared in front of Jiyu. The 2 of them exchanged their blood for a huge increase in Xian Qi. Jiyu slapped the thick earth on the ground. Ding! The host has used Thick Earth City Wall. Received 1 by 999 experience points. The Thick Earth City Wall directly surrounded Jiyu. The 2 of them landed, leaving only a trace. Chapter 696. The Xingxuan brothers never expected Ji Yu to have such strength. His gaze locked onto Ji Yu. Ji Yu suddenly turned around. She slapped her hands on the ground. 2 earth dragons suddenly flew out and let out a roar. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they burst forward. They wrapped around the Xingxuan brothers. The 2 brothers wanted to break free from the earth dragons in front of them, but the earth dragons bound their legs. They let out a heavy pressure. Their legs were in immense pain. They slapped their bodies and fell to the ground. They looked in the direction of Ji Yu. Ji Yu disappeared in the blink of an eye. The earthen dragon let out a roar and shot towards the 2 of them. They hit their bodies. Their protective auras suddenly shattered. The 2 of them fell to the ground. The Xingxuan brothers supported each other and were able to stand steadily on the ground. They looked at each other. Ji Yu said indifferently, "Scram." Ji Yu only said 1 sentence. The 2 of them looked at each other. It was obvious that they were no match for each other in terms of strength. At this moment, they disappeared from the spot. When the city lord saw that his 2 hired thugs had run away, he fell to the ground in a daze. He looked fearfully in the direction of Ji Yu, as if he was afraid of what would happen later. Ji Yu had a smile on her face. She looked at the person in front of her and said slowly, "From today onwards, change the city lord." After saying this, she raised her hand and chopped down. The city lord screamed and turned around. Ji Yu turned around and walked in the other direction. After seeing their city lord's head, the remaining people did not dare to resist. They looked at each other and walked out. They bowed and said to Ji Yu, "Greetings, young master." The guards in the city didn't have the confidence to defeat the big shot who defeated the Star Soul Hall, so they could only bow and surrender. Ji Yu asked them to send an army to the new village to pick up the old people. The old people said that they were old and didn't want to run around, so they planned to spend the rest of their lives here. Ji Yu also understood that these old people didn't want to walk around. She sighed and said faintly, "That's good. I'll have people send food here regularly." After saying this, Ji Yu returned to the secret chamber in the city lord's manor. She sat cross-legged on the floor and channeled the profound energy in her hands into the corpse in front of her. Along with the infusion of profound energy, Ji Yu also regained her consciousness. At this time, they fused with the corpse. After 3 days, the corpse suddenly opened its eyes. It was as if there was a warm light shining directly on the ground. Ji Yu knew that it already had a rudimentary consciousness. With such a puppet here, Ji Yu wasn't worried about how they would treat the old people. After tidying up, Ji Yu stood up. Suddenly, 2 servants of the city lord's manor walked over. "Sir, there's someone outside asking for an audience." This made Ji Yu very curious. At this time, who would come to see her? After acknowledging, she walked out of the door. A young man in a white robe appeared. He cupped his hands and said to Ji Yu, "This one's name is Chen Qing. I'm a disciple of the North Profound sect. It's said that 2 days ago, Mr. broke through the Xingxuan brothers' joint mystic technique by yourself. Is that true?" Ji Yu smiled faintly. "If it wasn't true, you wouldn't have come here." After saying this, the 2 of them cupped their hands and said faintly, "We want to invite you to join our North Profound sect. If Mr. is alone, it's extremely easy for the Star Soul Palace to plot against you." He originally thought that. Their hearts trembled. Ji Yu said faintly, "Sure." They never expected that Ji Yu would actually agree to this request. After saying this, they looked at each other and took a step forward. Juan's sky lit up with a ray of light. That ray of light directly shot into the ground. A pillar of light directly shot into the ground. The 2 of them directly entered that pillar of light. With a flash of light, they instantly disappeared from their original spot. This was the moment when the light flashed. After a moment, they appeared on top of a huge palace. Ji Yu slowly took a step forward. A few fairies walked out and rubbed Chen Qing's face. "Little fatty, this is the expert you were talking about." Chen Qing pushed them away with great difficulty. He pouted and said, "Don't pinch my face. It hurts." The fairies looked at each other and laughed out loud. He was really too cute. They thought in their hearts. However, this Ji Yu was too handsome. After training for so long, In addition to the increase of Ji-Yu's strength, his appearance had also changed greatly. He went from an average-looking guy to a handsome guy. Ji-Yu said faintly, "Greetings, fairies." Chen Qing said, "Don't stop me. I still want to bring him into the Great Year Palace." As they walked, Chen Qing asked, "I was originally prepared for you to reject me. Why did you agree?" Ji-Yu suddenly stopped and said faintly, "There's no other reason. It's just that I want to see how strong the experts here are. Also, I want to conquer the evolving temple." Hearing that Ji-Yu wanted to conquer the evolving temple, his eyes revealed a look of disbelief. He secretly bumped Ji-Yu's shoulder. He said faintly, "Try not to say such things. If those fellows outside hear it, there will be a lot of trouble." Ji-Yu smiled. He didn't care about these so-called troubles. In the Great Year Palace, an old man appeared. He was holding a wine jug. Ji-Yu actually sensed a trace of danger from him. He looked forward and said faintly, "This kid is quite capable. If he were to be a disciple, he would be wronged. I think a rank 3 instructor should be suitable." After saying that, he took out a token and threw it to Ji-Yu, 50 mystical stones a month. "You will eat and live in the Shen sect. Is this treatment okay?" Ji-Yu nodded. He didn't lack mystical stones. Seeing this scene, the old man nodded in satisfaction. He burped and walked out of the door. Chapter 697. Chen Qing and Ji-Yu introduced the situation of the North Profound sect. The disciples were split into 4 classes: Heaven, Earth, Profound, and Yellow. As the name suggested, the Yellow students were the lowest class of disciples. The Shen class was the higher class, while the Heaven and Earth class members were the most respected. Instructors, on the other hand, were divided into 9 grades. The first to third class teachers were the teachers of the Yellow class. Ji-Yu never expected that he would be the teacher of the lowest class. He wanted to see how low the talents of these students were. He stepped into the door, only to see a faint white light shining out from inside. Ji-Yu took a step forward and turned around, disappearing from the spot in an instant. Dong dong dong, the bell rang 3 times. Ji-Yu came to the door of a class. Chattering noises came from inside. They were either saying that they had gone to some mortal world to play in a brothel, or that they had bullied someone. After saying this, they turned around. Ji-Yu slowly took a step forward. The students inside acted as if Ji-Yu had never appeared. They were still talking, but Ji-Yu sat behind the table and didn't care about them. 2 white-bearded old men walked past the corridor. "White Shen Zun, don't worry. Our teachers here are the best. It's the best choice for your child to be here. The son of the Star Soul Empire's Prime Minister will definitely be here." White Shen Zun laughed and said to the old man, "Vice Principal, don't worry. The Empire will continue to support you. After all, the Star Soul Palace is really despicable. I heard that they are in cahoots with the Evolving Temple." They turned around and walked in front of a small door. Just as they were about to enter, the person beside them pulled them back and stood still. White Shen Zun said angrily, "Is this how your teachers teach their students? If this is the case, how will they fight for the Empire's leadership with the Star Soul Palace? These teachers are definitely something." After saying this, they looked at each other. They took a step forward and planned to look inside. They stood up and Ji-Yu stretched his back. "Are you done? You don't even have a single entry-level Shen cultivator. Are you not embarrassed to make a ruckus here?" After hearing Ji-Yu's words, they looked at each other. Ji-Yu stood up and punched out. The huge rock in front of him suddenly exploded. The rocks fell to the ground. He said faintly, "Does anyone want to have such power?" A child stood up. "My father is the Star Soul Empire's great general. With him around, I can bully people even if I don't work hard. What if your father is gone?" When he heard Ji-Yu's words, he was immediately rendered speechless. Ji-Yu said indifferently, "Maybe the person who bullies you tomorrow will be the person next to you." After hearing Ji-Yu's words, he clenched his fists. "What I said is the truth. You're just a rank 3 teacher. I don't know what right you have. Ying'en Yu, beat him up." After shouting this sentence, a black shadow appeared on the ground. He pulled out a sword from his back and locked his gaze on Ji-yu. In the blink of an eye, he flew out and charged in Ji-yu's direction. He waved his precious weapon. Black fog spread out. Ji-yu felt his shadow solidify, as if it was binding Ji-yu. A disdainful smile appeared on Ji-yu's face. There was a loud boom. The shadow immediately broke apart. Ji-yu stretched out his hand, and an earth dragon flew out and crashed into him. Ding! The host used the power of earth and gained 1 by 999 experience points. With a loud bang, the shadow fell to the ground. Ying-en-yu spat out a mouthful of blood. The young man was shocked. "He's the most powerful person under my father." He sucked in a breath of cold air. Ji-yu slowly took 2 steps forward and summoned the precious artifact into his hand. Shadow Slave stood up. He cupped his hands and said, "I lost." After saying this, he bowed and left. Ji-yu said indifferently, "Do you admit defeat?" After hearing Ji-yu's words, they bent down and disappeared in an instant. Ji-yu slowly took a step in another direction. The rest of them looked at each other and stood up. Ji-yu said indifferently, "From now on, go out and run 1,000 laps." "What?" The faces of the students instantly darkened. Ji-yu took the lead and ran out, leading them. Bai Xian-zun stroked his beard. "That's more like it." After running 1,000 laps, they fell to the ground in exhaustion. At this time, a teacher of the Xian class came out and looked at the students lying on the ground. He suddenly laughed and said, "You students want to control our territory?" After hearing this, Ji-yu looked up. The students on both sides were stunned and looked at the field. Ji-yu said indifferently, "This is our territory. What can we do?" The teacher of the Xian class said, "You trash students don't need to do so much training." Ji-yu frowned. "Then what do you want?" After saying this, they looked at each other and said, "Get out of here." Ji-yu slowly took a step forward. The dark force on his body gradually emerged and a strong aura enveloped his body. He looked in front of him. The teacher of the Xian class said indifferently, "Why? Do you want to fight?" He stepped on the ground, and a shadow appeared on his body. This was the manifestation of the Xian wolf beast's possession. In the Star Soul Empire, most people chose to use the Xian beast martial soul fusion Xian skill. He said indifferently, "We don't know if you have the ability to do so." After hearing this, Ji-yu directly flew forward and disappeared from the spot. He turned around and unleashed a barrage of attacks. The 2 streaks of Xian light suddenly flew out. The explosion landed on the ground and caused the ground to explode. Chapter 698. The Xian instructor snorted coldly. Seeing that Ji-yu had easily dodged his attack, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. He took out his precious weapon and charged towards Ji-yu. The aura chi on Ji-yu's body suddenly burst out, and the aura chi directly approached him. After feeling the aura chi, the Xian instructor directly grew a sharp claw in his hand. At the same time, he flew towards Ji-yu. The claw directly clawed at Ji-yu. The Xian instructor turned around and jumped in front of Ji-yu. He directly clawed at Ji-yu. Ji-yu turned around, but before he could use the Kuan-peng giant sword, a ball of fire had already appeared in his hand. Along with the fire in his hand, the Xian instructor directly swung his sharp claw forward. The 2 balls of fire directly split apart and fell to the ground. At this moment, the flames on the fire quickly spread over. It burned on his body. The flames directly burned the aura energy on his body. A ball of fire appeared on the Xian instructor's body. He took a step back and directly flew towards Ji-yu. He raised his hand and heavily swung it down. The force was so great that it directly hit Ji-yu's body. After the wolf claw came into contact with the aura energy, it immediately rebounded and he fell heavily to the ground. Long live the instructor, long live the instructor. At this moment, he immediately cheered. He turned around and instantly disappeared. In the next moment, he flew in front of Ji-yu. He heavily swung his sharp claw in the direction of Ji-yu. Ji-yu leaped up and stomped heavily on the other party's body. With a loud bang, the other party's body caved in and a huge crater appeared under him. He stood up and shot his gaze in Ji-Yu's direction. In an instant, he rushed forward and attacked Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu suddenly turned around, and the precious weapon in her hand suddenly flew out. After the Kuan-Peng giant sword appeared, it directly shot out. At this moment, the golden light was released. He flew in front of Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu turned around. In an instant, the precious weapon broke through the Xian instructor's aura energy. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body went limp and fell into a pool of blood. Ji-Yu said indifferently, "How is it? Do you still want to continue?" The instructor of the Xian class wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, turned around, and directly walked out of the door. After opening the door, he instantly disappeared. He took out a precious weapon and attacked Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu turned around, and the precious weapon bombarded with a heavy sword. He originally wanted to give Ji-Yu a surprise attack, but unexpectedly, Ji-Yu directly subdued him. He said indifferently, okay, I'll let you go." After saying this, he turned around and directly led the people of the Xian class out of the door. This was the first time they felt so sincere and incomparably excited. At this moment, Ji-Yu turned around and disappeared in an instant. He looked at the children who were still cheering. He directly said, "What are you still doing here? You'll have a good time in the future." After shouting out these words, Li Yundong was stunned. Those people stood up one after another and directly ran out. After running for a while, he turned around and locked his gaze in Ji-Yu's direction. In an instant, they disappeared on the spot. One after another, they quickly ran in the other direction. The people of the Xian class wiped the corners of their mouths and said indifferently, "Instructor, are we just going to let it go like this?" There was a hint of resentment in their eyes, and a trace of a smile appeared on the corners of their mouths. He said indifferently, "Even if he is powerful, so what?" After hearing this sentence, they looked at each other and slowly took a step forward. Suddenly, at this moment, a ball of fire slowly appeared. His body flashed and disappeared on the spot. The next moment, he appeared in Ji-Yu's direction. He took out a precious weapon and directly charged in Ji-Yu's direction. Ji-Yu took out the precious weapon in front of her and directly turned around. The precious weapon suddenly swung up. The two weapons collided and disappeared on the spot. The few puppets in front of her kept flying in the air and charged in Ji-Yu's direction. Those people sat on the chairs. They flew forward, waving their precious weapons, and directly charged in Ji-Yu's direction. Ji-Yu turned around, held the precious weapon in her hand, and directly collided with them. Accompanied by a loud boom, there was a loud sound. At this moment, smoke came out. They fixed their eyes on Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu said indifferently, "Did you see that?" The instructor of the Xian class frowned and said, "They are just trash. As long as you win the competition in half a month, won't it be fine?" At this moment, this sentence slowly came to an end. Half a month later, at this moment, there was a loud boom in the surroundings. At this moment, they heard the sound of drums. They walked out one after another with a precious weapon on them. They sat in front of the table. They sat on both sides of the table. The martial arts tournament was coming up. At this moment, they slowly walked up to the arena. One of them stood up and said, "Everyone, today's martial arts tournament is a battle between the disciples of the Sky, Earth, Xian, and Yellow sects. This concerns the honor of the Northern Xian sect and the Star Soul Empire. Everyone, let's begin." Accompanied by the loud sound of drums, there was a loud boom. Ji-Yu picked out 12 students from the yellow class and taught them a set of array formations. They directly jumped into the arena. At this moment, the rest of the people slowly climbed onto the stage. At this moment, their gazes met. They all raised their hands and looked at each other. At this moment, the people from the Xian class also climbed into the arena. They said coldly, "Ha ha ha, today we will take revenge for our instructors." After saying this, they all looked up at the same time. Their gazes were fixed on Ji-Yu. Ji-Yu said indifferently, "Remember." Chapter 699. The rest of the people stared at Ji-Yu. They looked in Ji-Yu's direction with determined eyes. Ji-Yu's body flashed and disappeared from the spot. She followed that person to the arena, and a whining sound slowly came out. The rest of the people slowly walked out and locked their eyes on Ji-Yu's team. The 12 people of the yellow class stood in the arena. He slowly raised his fist. The students of the Shen class walked up to the arena and raised their hands. Shen class, holy light illuminates the earth. After shouting these words, a ray of Shen light suddenly shone down from the sky and covered the ground. Suddenly, a huge circle of light appeared on the ground. It directly covered everyone in the arena. Ji-Yu faced the people of the yellow class on the arena. They raised their hands, and in an instant, their precious weapons appeared in their hands. They pointed the treasures in the direction of the yellow class students and raised the treasures in their hands. Kill. After shouting these words, countless lightning bolts struck in their direction in an instant. The members of the yellow class jumped up one after another. The precious weapons in their hands were all made by Ji-Yu. Their precious weapons flew out one after another. The precious weapons collided with the thunderbolts. It was accompanied by a loud rumbling sound. The precious weapons made by Ji-Yu slashed through the thunderbolts and directly penetrated their protective chi. After a loud bang, Li Yundong's eyes lit up. They all flew backwards. The members of the yellow class instantly disappeared from the spot and shouted at the precious weapons. The precious weapons all lit up with a ray of Shen light. The precious weapons instantly pierced through their bodies. The students of the Shen class never expected that they would only be able to take a few moves from them. Their bodies went soft and they fell to the ground. At this moment, the blood on their bodies slowly flowed down. A level 8 instructor walked out and said, "The competition is over. The yellow class wins." Everyone was stunned in place. They never expected that the yellow class led by Ji-Yu could actually beat them. Ji-Yu took 2 steps forward and nodded at them. He said indifferently, "You all did well." After hearing Ji-Yu's words, they nodded with pride written all over their faces. Ji-Yu turned around. The level 8 instructor said, "It doesn't seem right for you to continue teaching the yellow class. Why don't we transfer you to the Shen class?" Ji-Yu said indifferently, "No need." After he said this, the level 8 instructor snorted coldly, as if he was ashamed of Ji-Yu's shameless behavior. The Shen class instructor stared at them and snorted coldly. The rest of the competition ended very quickly. The yellow class led by Ji-Yu had only been here for a short month. It was already very rare for them to improve so quickly. As for the Sky class and Earth class students, their Shen energy had far surpassed the Shen energy of the other classes. Accompanied by the sound of the horn, the competition started. At this moment, the competition had already ended. The level 8 instructor said, "The tradition of our Star Soul Empire every year is to lead new students like you into the depths of the Star Soul Forest to find suitable Shen beasts. Only by combining with Shen beasts can you possess strong Shen energy and powerful Shen techniques." After he said this, they looked at each other and stood up. Ji-Yu took 2 steps forward and disappeared from the spot. After a moment, she appeared not far away. A strong red Shen energy flowed from her hand and into the huge rock in front of her. The huge rock suddenly lit up. She opened the Shen flash stone in an instant. Outside was the depths of the Star Soul Forest. They stepped into the Star Soul Forest. The yellow class students were the first to enter. The level 8 instructor looked at the Shen class instructor and looked at Ji-Yu, who was not far away, and made a throat-slitting gesture at him. The two of them widened their eyes as they stepped into the halo. The Earth class teacher and the Earth class teacher had seen the scene just now, and a smile appeared on his face. But he just wanted to watch the battle between the two classes. The Sky class students walked in one after another. The Sky class had a total of 12 people and was known as the Golden Generation. As members of the Golden Generation, they did not need to look at anyone. Therefore, when they saw them, the corners of their mouths curled into a smile. They disappeared from the spot. In the next moment, the teacher of the Sky class wore a long pink dress, and it was a strapless dress. Everyone looked at her impressive figure and revealed envious expressions. "You have to be careful, some people don't have good intentions." Zi Xueling's arrogance made her not fear anyone, but she only gave a warning. At this moment, Zi Xueling took out her treasured weapon and led her students into the deepest part of the forest. The Earth class students didn't dare to go that far, and could only watch this scene from afar. At this moment, when they stepped into the Star Soul forest, the Shen class students looked at Jiyu and the others. Jiyu opened her mouth and said, "According to normal Shen cultivator logic, I should help you take down the Shen beasts in the periphery. But now, I feel that the Shen beasts in the inner area are more suitable for you." After saying this, they looked forward. Their gazes locked onto Jiyu's direction. A yellow class student asked, "That, instructor, the Shen beasts in there are very powerful. We are not their match." After hearing this, they looked at each other. Jiyu said, "If you want the Shen beasts in the periphery, then stay here obediently. Wait for me to help them kill the Shen beasts, then it will be your turn." After hearing Jiyu's words, he raised his head and looked forward. He said indifferently, "That, instructor, I was wrong. I should not have doubted you." Jiyu smiled faintly and led them into the forest. She said to the people behind her, "You guys follow." After shouting this, Jiyu took the lead and started running. This time, she did not use any Shen techniques. They followed behind Jiyu and kept running. They ran into the depths of the forest. A lion suddenly jumped out. It roared in a low voice and opened its mouth, revealing 2 sharp teeth. At this moment, the lion slowly walked forward and locked its gaze on Jiyu. Jiyu was the first to rush out. She gathered the Shen Qi in her hand and merged it into her fist. In the blink of an eye, she punched the leopard. The leopard was instantly sent flying. It crashed into a pillar and fell to the ground. The mystical beast did not expect that it, who was usually the leader in this deep forest, would actually fall to its hands. The instructor of the Shen class said indifferently, "That Shen beast does not have much breath left. You guys go." After shouting this, they jumped down from the trees. They got into a horse stance and charged towards Jiyu. Jiyu turned around. He stretched out his hand and grabbed 2 students of the Shen class. He turned around and flung the 2 people away. The 2 of them slid on the ground. The 3 students of the Shen class filled their bodies with Shen Qi and charged towards Jiyu. Jiyu threw out several punches. Those fists kept swinging out. Boom, boom, boom. 3 fists suddenly fell and collided with their fists. Catcher, 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 catcher. Their bodies went limp and they all fell to the ground. It was as if there was a sea of blood that was constantly spreading over. At this moment, Jiyu slowly looked over. They flew forward and turned around, slashing down with their swords. The instructor of the Shen class fell back a few steps. Their gazes collided. Jiyu said indifferently, "Could it be that you don't care about the opinion of your fellow students and want to fight with me? Haha, your background is unknown and we don't know who you are. Kill." After shouting this, they leaped out. They pulled out their swords and charged towards Jiyu. Ding, ding, ding. The swords in the air kept colliding with each other. Jiyu's body spun rapidly. At this moment, a loud boom rang out, and the treasured weapon was sent flying backward. Their gazes met at this moment. Jiyu picked up the treasured weapon in front of her and flew towards them. She brandished her sword, causing blood to flow out of the 2 men's necks. He immediately covered his neck. His body went limp and fell to the ground. You. He said the word "you" 3 times, and his mouth was like a mute. Jiyu said indifferently, "H." With a cold snort, he took the precious weapon and slit his neck. A stream of blood suddenly flew up and landed on the ground beside him. Jiyu said indifferently, "Do it." After saying this, he took 2 steps forward and raised the bejeweled weapon in his hand. He directly stabbed down with the bejeweled weapon in his hand. At this moment, the cheetah spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, the Shen beast soul was injected into the cheetah's body. Chapter 700. Li Fu stabbed his magical weapon into the body of the Shen beast in front of him. That Shen beast could only let out a roar of unwillingness. As the soul of the Shen beast entered his body, His body underwent a huge change. In a short moment, it was as if a Shen beast soul had entered his body. He took a step forward, his movements neither light nor fast. A loud boom suddenly sounded. The surrounding trees collapsed one after another. A burst of profound energy poured into his body. He flew up and kept running forward, swinging out a heavy punch. There was a loud bang. The leopard Shen beast's claws flew out and grabbed the trees in front of him. In the next moment, several cracks appeared on the trees in front of him. In the blink of an eye, it collapsed. Jiyu slowly opened her mouth and said, "Your strength has already reached a decent level. The rest of you, follow me in." After shouting this sentence, the remaining students came out one after another with a trace of excitement on their faces. In their eyes, as long as they could inject the souls of the Shen beasts into their bodies, they would be able to become the strongest of their generation. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from his original spot. They all followed Jiyu and flew into the depths of the forest of star souls. They landed on the ground one after another, and in that instant, their gazes shifted to the periphery. The instructor of the Shen class had never expected that Jiyu would actually dare to go on a killing spree. Although he didn't really kill them, he was almost certain that the people behind him would have nothing to do with the great Tao of the profound in this lifetime. The 3 students standing behind him were his last pride. He would not allow his pride to be challenged in any way. At that moment, they flew forward. Their gazes were locked onto Jiyu. At the same time, they pulled out their magical weapons from their backs. They charged towards Jiyu. He turned around and brandished the treasure weapon in his hand, causing a loud boom to resound. The 3 students stood in front of Jiyu. Just now, when they were considering, Jiyu waved her hand and the rest of them flew forward. With Jiyu's help, they defeated the Shen beasts. They stood in front of the Shen beasts. The 3 from the Shen class were still planning to kill the Shen beasts in Jiyu's hands. He could not help but smile. The rest of them attacked at the same time and killed the Shen beasts below them. After killing them, their Shen beasts' souls slowly floated up. They entered their bodies. The souls of the 3 Shen beasts poured into their bodies at that moment. They merged with that person's body. They opened their eyes instantly. They picked up the Shen beasts from the ground and immediately jumped up, locking their gazes on Jiyu. In the next moment, they all raised the treasures in their hands and charged forward. Jiyu took a step back. The few people behind her appeared in front of Jiyu in an instant. They pulled out their weapons and looked in Jiyu's direction. After a loud boom, there was a loud explosion. At this moment, the remaining people were sent flying backwards. They fell on their bodies. They never expected that the students under Jiyu, who were originally lacking in talent, would become such powerful existences after adding the Shen beast souls. In the next instant, they flew forward. He raised the bejeweled artifact in his hand and swung it down heavily in an instant. The 3 people who were known as geniuses were smashed into pieces and fell into a pool of blood. The assistant teacher of the Shen class did not know how to face this situation. His homeroom teacher was killed and the rest of them could only keep retreating. He raised his hands and cupped them. "Teacher Jiyu." Jiyu looked at him. "Why? Do you want to join in the fun too?" After hearing Jiyu's words, his face suddenly turned red. How could he dare to go against Jiyu now? He said indifferently, "Teacher Jiyu, what are you saying? I came this time to take my people away. You think you can come and go as you please?" The assistant instructor's face suddenly reddened as he fished out a gem from his bosom. This was a profound stone with the greatest amount of profound energy. With a heavy swing, the profound stone in his hand danced in the air. At this moment, they raised their heads and locked their gazes on Jiyu. "Can we still leave now?" After hearing this, Jiyu put the profound stone into his storage ring and directly destroyed it. When they saw this scene, they turned around. In an instant, they disappeared on the spot. He turned around and walked slowly in another direction. He said indifferently, "Let's go." The assistant knew that Jiyu looked down on them. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared on the spot. After a while, Jiyu turned around and slowly said, "It's about time for us to go back." After killing the remaining Shen beasts, They poured all their Shen energy into each other's bodies. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, they opened their eyes. They were overjoyed to have obtained so many Shen beast souls. They cupped their hands together and said, "Thank you, teacher." After shouting these words, they instantly disappeared from where they were. After many ups and downs, they landed on the ground and ran out in an instant. They all started running. Jiyu turned around and looked at the people behind her. She said disdainfully, "What do you plan to do?" After hearing those words, they immediately flew up and ran out. Jiyu said indifferently, "Use your Shen beast souls." After shouting this, they emitted a wave of Shen energy. Their bodies were covered by the Shen beast souls. In an instant, they flew out. Their speed increased a lot in an instant. They kept following behind them. At this moment, they slowly raised their heads and looked in front. At this moment, they landed on the ground and heard a cry for help not far away. Jiyu's face suddenly showed a trace of vigilance. Jiyu shouted loudly. The Shen beast souls on their bodies did not descend. Instead, they covered their bodies. He turned around, and only then did the people behind him come forward. At this moment, the remaining people landed on the ground one after another and lifted their gazes. It turned out that the students of Sky Class and Earth Class were facing a huge King Kong. The King Kong roared at this moment. Roar. After shouting this sentence, a lot of ripples flew out of their mouths. Roar. The remaining people of the Sky Class all flew backwards. They landed on the ground and slid away. The remaining people all activated their protective aura chi and floated up. After seeing the protective chi, they raised their heads and looked in Jiyu's direction. Jiyu said, "Do you need help?" The teachers of the Sky Class and Earth Class were all geniuses among geniuses, heroes among heroes. Now, they saw their Earth Class teachers being beaten back by a mystical beast. There was a trace of disdain in their eyes. They said, "Our two classes can't do this. Can Teacher Ji defeat the King Kong Shen beast?" After shouting these words, the King Kong Shen beast patted its chest. Jiyu turned around and said indifferently, "You're not its match. Hurry up and back off." After Jiyu shouted these words, the King Kong Shen beast patted its chest and flew up, whipping the students of Sky Class away. They landed on the ground and slid away heavily. Jiyu saw this and asked, "Are you all okay?" After rescuing them, they exchanged glances with each other and took all the children into their arms. They stood in the middle of the group and gazed at each other. At this moment, Jiyu looked up. They instantly flew out and released their gazes. At this moment, he channeled his energy into his fist. He swung his fist and was able to collide with the King Kong Shen beast's fist. In a short time, the ground and mountains around them shook. He was able to use his physical strength to collide with the King Kong Shen beast's fist. When they collided, there was a loud bang and a faint light came from the surroundings. At this moment, the King Kong Shen beast took 2 steps back. At this moment, it raised its head and slapped its chest. It let out a roar, and the surrounding fluctuations continued to spread out at this time. At this moment, the profound beast Vajra lifted its head and flew out. It spun around on the ground and continuously waved its claws. The profound strength in their hands slowly appeared at this moment and struck the profound strength into the surrounding stones. At this moment, the stones fell to the ground one after another. The remaining King Kong Shen beast patted its chest and flew in front of Jiyu. It swung its fist heavily. There were also a few people who raised their hands at this time, and a green aura appeared on the Shen beast Vajra. Chapter 701. The gazes of Li Fu and the others were locked onto Jiyu at this moment. Hooray, hooray! Teacher Jiyu is mighty. At this moment, the surrounding profound energy shrouded his body. Jiyu disappeared in a flash. The Sky and Earth class teachers made their moves at the same time. Out of Jiyu's expectations, the Sky class teacher was actually a support-type mystic cultivator. Jiyu quickly understood why she was able to become a teacher. The mystic energy in his body surged. What was even more ridiculous was that the rest of the people quickly jumped in front of Ji-yu. The Earth class teacher was a defense-type teacher. He slammed the ground heavily, and a wall appeared in front of him. King Kong's violent body rushed forward at this moment. He swung his fist heavily, and it landed on the wall, followed by an explosive sound. A rippling sound came from the surroundings. He locked his gaze onto Ji-yu. Ji-yu slowly took 2 steps forward and said indifferently, "Mystic skill, Raging Inferno." Ding, host used Raging Inferno. Obtained experience points 1 by 999. At this moment, the Inferno burned King Kong's body. The flames burned King Kong's body. King Kong slapped his body and let out an angry roar. At this moment, they retreated backwards. At this moment, King Kong turned around and fell like a meteor. Ji-yu raised his hands. He raised his hands and his fist collided with the opponent's fist. A trembling sound came from the surroundings. At this moment, King Kong flew backwards and hit the stone wall. With the support of the Sky Class teacher, Ji-yu felt that his entire body was filled with mystic energy. He flew forward, raised his hand, and landed a heavy punch. At this moment, the Vajra fell. It was as if a huge crater had appeared on the ground. The Vajra had actually sunk straight down. It was completely covered by the sand. Ji-yu slammed his hands on the ground. The sand kept falling downwards and rushed to a place hundreds of meters away from the ground. Ji-yu slammed the ground again. All the sand merged together. Under the effect of the mystical skill, the Vajra mystical beast's beast soul was almost sent flying. Ji-yu was slapped onto the ground. King Kong flew out at this moment and fell to the ground. King Kong panted heavily. Seeing this, Ji-yu slowly stepped forward and said indifferently, "Su Cheng, kill it." After Ji-yu shouted this, the yellow class student took a step forward. He flew out like a sharp arrow and landed on King Kong's shoulder, raising his treasure weapon high. At this moment, many icicles fell from the sky. Su Cheng raised his hand and covered himself with a layer of qi, blocking the icicles. A student from the Sky class suddenly made a move. There was a smile on his face. "I am Lai Fu. Brother, as long as you are willing to give up the King Kong mystic beast, you can ask for whatever elixir you need. Our family has a say in the Star Soul Empire." After saying this, they took 2 steps forward. The remaining Sky class students quickly ran out and landed beside Lai Fu. It was as if in the next second, as long as Su Cheng said no, they would rush up and kill him on the ground. He said indifferently, "Sorry, but this King Kong's soul is what I need." After shouting these words, they rushed forward and killed in Su Cheng's direction. The current Su Cheng did not have much profound strength, so they raised their hands and blocked the profound strength outside. Ji-yu felt that his training had reached a certain point. Ji-yu disappeared from his spot and appeared in front of his opponent in the next moment. He took out his treasure weapon and waved it. The treasure weapon hit the layer of qi, and the Sky class student was sent flying. He stood on the spot and looked up. Ji-yu flew up and attacked the 2 students. A blinding white light shone. Those students hurriedly used their ice elemental skills and icicles instantly flew towards Ji-yu's direction. Under the shroud of Gang Qi, the ice spikes were blocked. After breaking through their aura shield, the white light penetrated their bodies, and in the next instant, they fell to the ground. They panted heavily and looked in Ji-yu's direction. Ji-yu said indifferently, "If you come again, I will kill you." However, the student called Lai Fu didn't seem to want to give up. He looked at the group of people beside him. "Aren't you going to attack together? As long as you attack, I promise to help you get the mystical beast." When the Earth class students heard this, they turned around. Their hearts were suddenly moved. They flew forward in a short moment and blocked in front of Ji-yu. They turned around and looked at Ji-yu. "Okay, we are willing to help you." After saying this, they flew forward at the same time and landed on top of Ji-yu. He looked in Ji-yu's direction. Countless flames, lightning, sand, icicles. At this moment, they crazily smashed towards Ji-yu's direction. Their eyes seemed to tremble at this moment. Ji-yu took a step forward. At this moment, the sand and other things hit her qi. They collided with her qi. With a loud bang, The remaining people were sent flying and fell to the ground. No matter how they thought about it, they could not understand why so many people's Shen skills were not Jiyu's match. They could not even leave a single wound on Jiyu's body. This made them feel extremely humiliated. Jiyu flew forward and waved the treasure weapon in her hand. He swung his sword heavily. That mysterious light flew out in an instant and collided with the air. After falling down with a bang, the rest of the people were once again sent flying backwards. The teacher of the sky class couldn't stand it anymore. He brought his students and stood in front of Jiyu. He said calmly, "How dare you attack us?" After hearing this sentence, they looked at each other with a trace of embarrassment on their faces. Jiyu's body disappeared from the spot in an instant. A moment later, he charged forward with the treasure in his hand. The Earth class teacher followed beside him. He wore a long black robe and stood next to Jiyu. He turned around and threw the treasure artifact in his hand. Two rays of mysterious light collided with each other at that moment. One black and one white person stood on the Shen stone. He looked at Jiyu and told his students to retreat. A battle at their level could destroy the students who participated in it. He said calmly, "Shen skill, flying black bug. Shen skill, 10,000 miles of eternal spring." The black bugs flew towards Jiyu. Jiyu still didn't intend to use any Shen skill. She felt that it would be enough if she moved her hands. She flew forward, picked up the treasure weapon in front of her, and swung it out. After the treasure weapon was swung out, the bugs fell to the ground one by one. The power of fire enveloped their bodies. The bugs turned around and swallowed Jiyu whole. Jiyu turned around and disappeared from her spot. At this moment, they all retreated and stood in front of Jiyu. They locked their gazes on Jiyu. Jiyu flew up, holding the treasure weapon in her hand. She swung the treasure weapon upwards. At this moment, the treasure weapon, carrying a trace of the power of lightning, fell into the pile of bugs. The bugs seemed to be ignited in an instant. The fire swallowed the bugs whole. He turned around and swung his sword again. The long sword flew out with a white light and landed on the other party's body. He blinked his eyes and his body flashed, disappearing from the spot. Picking up the treasure weapon in front of her, Jiyu turned around and said calmly, "Kill." After shouting these words, the word kill covered their faces and covered all their auras. Under the murderous aura, the white light landed on the black-robed man. "Fei Ying, be careful." After shouting these words, he suddenly widened his eyes. The gang qi in his hand gathered in an instant, forming a huge shield. At this moment, the Shen qi collided with Jiyu's body. Jiyu flew out and landed on the ground. He said calmly, "Do you still want to continue?" At this moment, he flew in front of Jiyu and slashed heavily on Jiyu's body. Jiyu raised the Kuan-Peng giant sword in her hand and made a loud sound. At this moment, a loud sound came from the sky. Roar! Dong dong dong! A Shen beast with the body of a snake, the head of a lion, and the feet of a leopard slowly stepped out at this moment. It locked its gaze on the King Kong and stretched out its hands, lifting the King Kong up. With a swing of its hands, it threw the King Kong towards the three of them. No one knew what would happen if such a huge Vajra fell on the three of them. However, each of them had their own movement techniques. In an instant, they disappeared from the spot. Chapter 702. Jiyu glanced at Li Fu as the giant King Kong fell to the ground. Li Fu was a smart person and immediately understood what Jiyu meant. Now that they were faced with such a huge creature, the Heaven, Earth, and Yellow class teachers had to seriously think of a way to deal with the huge creature. How would they have the time to care about these kids? As for the students from the other two classes, they were all injured by Jiyu. They did not have any fighting strength now. The corner of Li Fu's mouth revealed a slight smile. Fortunately, this huge monster did not kill his precious Vajra. Otherwise, he would have lost more than he gained. Thinking of this, he leaped up and raised the precious weapon in his hand. With a swing of his sword, he chopped off the giant beast's head in an instant. A beast spirit entered his body. The Sky and Earth class teachers locked their gazes on Jiyu. You took advantage of the situation. Ji smiled faintly. This is just a strategy. There are plenty of Shen beasts in the Star Soul Forest. After saying this, they flew up and disappeared from where they were. In the next moment, they appeared beside the giant. The instructor of the Sky class could only wave the crutch-like treasured weapon in his hand. Suddenly, a green Shen energy burst out and shrouded the giant creature. The giant creature roared and slapped its chest. It flew forward and roared at the sky. Ji instantly disappeared from his spot. A moment later, he slowly took a step forward and said indifferently, "Don't move." After shouting this, Ji disappeared. After a moment, the treasure weapon in his hand was swung out. At this moment, the Kuan-Peng's spirit flew out of the huge Kuan-Peng sword and pierced through his body. Ji turned around and swung the sword heavily. The Kuan-Peng's spirit pierced through the opponent's body. At this moment, the huge creature collided again. The black-robed teacher flew out and swung the huge sword in his hand. The power of the Kuan-Peng pierced through their bodies and collided with the rock behind them. A loud boom was heard. At this moment, the smoke slowly floated up. He held the treasure weapon in his hand and slowly walked forward. He saw that the spirit of the Kuan-Peng had disappeared from its original spot. Ji slowly opened his mouth and said, "The three of us should join forces and use our own ultimate profound skills to take down that giant beast." After saying this, Ji flew up and the treasure weapon in his hand combined. After the three sword chis combined, they charged towards the huge creature. Just as the giant beast turned its body, its palm lashed out, and the two people beside it were sent flying, heavily crashing into the huge rock. Immediately, a loud explosion rang out from the boulder. After a short moment, they fell to the ground, collapsing onto the ground. They even spat out blood. Ji took a step forward and looked at the two people on the ground. Ji said calmly, "How are you?" "I'm fine. I just broke a few ribs. I'm fine." After saying this, they flew up at the same time. Their eyes revealed a trace of determination. At this moment, they disappeared from their original positions. Ji waved a treasure weapon. Just as the huge creature turned around, the flames on Ji's body suddenly burned. He raised his hand, wanting to block the flames on Ji's body. At this moment, they collided. The flames burned on the huge creature's body. Ji looked at the flames in front of her and forced them to the huge creature's body. After being burned by the flames, he turned around and disappeared from his original position. Ji slowly took a step forward. She waved her sword and pierced through the huge creature's body. The huge creature let out a wail. At this moment, Ji realized that this huge creature had a total of 3 hearts. After her treasure weapon pierced through its body, she realized that there was only 1 heart left. Ji said calmly, "I'll leave this Shen beast to you guys." After saying that, they turned around and led their students away from the small forest. After disappearing from their original positions, Ji brought her students back to the North Shen Gate and entered through the gate. Ji slowly entered through the gate. When the Rank 8 instructor saw that Ji had brought her students back, but there was no one behind her, his heart thumped. He scolded angrily, "Brat, let me ask you. Where are the students from the other classes?" Ji smiled faintly, "They're still absorbing the remaining Shen beasts." After saying this, they stepped through the gate and disappeared from their original positions. The Rank 8 instructor clenched his fists. After returning from the Star Soul Forest, it was time for the children to be promoted. As long as they passed the test, they would be ranked again. Whether or not the instructor's status would be promoted would also be decided today. Ji stepped through the Shen Gate. In the next second, Ji looked at the students and saw that they were nervous. However, when she saw the wounds on the faces of the remaining students, Ji knew that the huge creature she had left behind yesterday was too tempting. It had attracted them to kill each other. Ji pointed at the Shen Gate in front of her. In the next moment, the Shen Gate in front of her opened. It was as if there were countless figures flying inside. It seemed that a few of them were looking in Ji's direction. Ji slowly stepped forward after he finished speaking. The remaining yellow class students entered the square one after another. After being injected with the mystic light, They became active one after another. They continuously ran out. At this moment, they felt that after returning from the Star Soul Forest, the Xian Qi in their bodies was continuously rising. The Sky Class and Earth Class students decided to work together. The Xian Qi in their bodies was continuously being injected. They raised their heads and shot their gazes in the direction of Jiyu. They directly charged forward. As long as they defeated the Yellow Class students, Jiyu would only be able to cry miserably. In their hearts, they suddenly thought of this, and a burst of profound qi burst out from their bodies. Boom, boom, boom. They kept falling down, and after a loud boom, they spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing them lying in a pool of blood, the students of the Yellow Class continuously cheered. Jiyu took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. In the next second, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Congratulations on entering the Sky Class. From today onwards, I am no longer in charge of you." After Jiyu finished speaking, they actually started cheering. This was somewhat similar to when they were young. An old man said, "Jiyu has been promoted to a 6th-rank teacher." After saying this, a few claps of thunder resounded in the sky. A few rays of white light were injected into the ground. They rode their white horses and slowly walked out. They looked out. At this moment, they slowly opened their mouth and said, "May I ask who is Jiyu?" Everyone's gazes landed on Jiyu. Jiyu walked out. At this moment, they opened their eyes. He said calmly, "This humble one is indeed Jiyu. Orders from the Star Soul Empire to recruit Jiyu into the Star Soul Imperial Army. He is to be appointed as a teacher. This is to be carried out immediately." Jiyu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. If he didn't want to, no one could force him to do anything. However, the Star Soul Empire's army was indeed a good method for him to use against the evolving temple. He walked forward. He didn't kneel like the others. Instead, he directly reached out and took the decree into his own hand. He put the decree into his storage ring. The North Profound sect didn't have much to say. The remaining people all walked forward and cupped their hands in greeting. After a moment, he disappeared from his original spot. He led the remaining people forward and entered the cave in front of him. After packing up his things, he rode on his Shen beast and moved forward bit by bit. At this time, a gentle breeze was blowing slowly. Countless people had worried smiles on their faces. Jiyu rode on his Shen beast and arrived at a place called the Iron Guard Army, only to see 2 doormen walking out. This is an important military camp. Idlers should leave quickly. Jiyu raised the decree. When they saw the decree in Jiyu's hand, they revealed a trace of embarrassment on their faces. They directly walked forward and knelt in front of Jiyu. Greetings to the teacher. Everyone knew that although the teacher's position wasn't high, the authority in his hands was very powerful. However, when he saw that it was Jiyu, he rode on his Shen beast and directly entered the place. He raised his head and looked around. He looked around. Jiyu said indifferently, "Greetings to the great general." The unkempt man was a little angry. He looked in Jiyu's direction. "How did you know that this old man is the great general?" A Xian cultivator's intuition. To be able to become a teacher means that you have some ability. However, this old man's army doesn't keep idlers. Please allow me to ask for guidance. After he finished speaking, a silver spear treasure appeared in his hand. He said indifferently, "This is an 8th grade treasure, the silver soul hooking spear. Be careful." After he finished speaking, he charged towards Jiyu. Chapter 703. Jiyu's heart was filled with respect for such a dutiful general. In his previous life, he admired soldiers the most. He said indifferently, "General, you're using a precious weapon. If I don't know what's good for me, it would be too disrespectful. General, please take a look at the precious weapon in my hand. It's called the Giant Sword of Kuan Peng. You can't underestimate it." When he heard Jiyu's words, he laughed heartily in his heart. "I'm a cultivator at the peak of the 5th level of the Spirit Profound realm. Kid, you should be more careful." As soon as he finished speaking, Jiyu reminded him to be careful and moved. Profound skill, Raging Flames Conflagration. Ding, the host has used Raging Flames Conflagration. You've gained 1 by 999 experience points. The flames came out from the treasure and turned into 5 fire dragons. They were like roaring dragons in the sky and let out a loud roar towards the sky. What a powerful profound skill. It should be an evolved profound skill. After roaring, the fire dragon flew out and circled around its body. It flew towards Jiyu and charged towards him. At this moment, the 5 giant dragons gathered together with a trace of dragon's might. At this moment, they merged together and directly rushed down. The invincible wind chaser directly hit those fire dragons and sent them flying. At this moment, the flames suddenly turned into nothingness. He looked over and said indifferently, "Kid, you can't show your skills to others." After saying this, he laughed loudly, as if he was mocking Jiyu. Jiyu took a step forward and gathered the profound force in his hands quickly. In an instant, a ray of profound light shot out from the sky and rushed into the sky. Ding, the host has used the fusion profound skill, Glory of Heaven and Earth. You've gained 1 by 999 experience points. This was Jiyu fusing the 5 natural profound forces together at this moment. The 5 rays of profound light quickly gathered together at this moment. At this moment, the ball of white light pressed down with incomparable majesty, followed by a huge explosion. Boom! At this moment, the flames spread out continuously. Jiyu turned around and opened her eyes. She said calmly, "Be careful, General." After shouting these words, the fire dragon quickly circled around. At the same time, the treasured weapons in his hands gathered together and he brandished his sword. With a wave of the treasure artifact, the flames fell heavily. The life treasures of the generals clashed together, creating a raging inferno. That person laughed out loud. "I am Duan Hong. You can teach me in the army." Jiyu's experience points gradually increased as they fought. He said calmly, "General, please enlighten me." The other party laughed and pulled Jiyu into the large tent. There were also a few people in armor around them. They walked into the large tent as well. Duan Hong said, "This is this general's new subordinate. Her name is Jiyu. You've all met her before." At this moment, the generals looked at each other and cupped their hands at the same time. One of them looked in Jiyu's direction. "General, these so-called young geniuses seem to be extremely powerful, but in reality, they are just grains of sand in the ocean." They were all people in the army. It was normal for them to fight when they didn't get along. Not to mention the position of teaching in the army. This was the proudest position of these Xian cultivators. The Empire's army in the central region was not like the army in the other 4 regions. They had the best combat strength. This was also why a Xian cultivator organization like the Star Soul Hall couldn't command the will of the royal authority. However, they still trained to protect the country. The biggest difference between them and those Xian cultivators who were alone was their Xian energy. At this moment, a powerful Xian energy was gathered. The Star Soul Hall had time to cultivate, which was why they were like this. They were actually dissatisfied. In the army, the most important thing was not other things, but powerful strength. Jiyu stood up and cupped her hands. She said to the crowd in front of her, "Since everyone is dissatisfied, why don't we see who's the real deal? Haha, we are all generals who go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. I don't care which Xian sect you came from. Just based on the fact that your hands have never seen blood, you are not a match for us." After saying this, they looked at each other. At this moment, along with a humming sound, they flew to the ground with treasured weapons in their hands and looked in their direction. Jiyu didn't hesitate and directly took out the treasured weapon beside her. She held the treasured weapon in her hand and ran forward. At this moment, the Kuan Peng weapon spirit flew out and let out a long flute in the air. At this moment, flames shot out. The flames fell on the surrounding ground and burned the surrounding area in an instant. Those flames were devouring everything in the surroundings at this time. Jiyu said indifferently, "Haha, is there anyone else who wants to go up?" The few generals looked at the raging flames and didn't dare to go up. They just cupped their hands and said that young master was indeed powerful. Since Ji-yu was a military instructor, she naturally had to see her subordinates. However, they didn't intend to let Ji-yu off so easily. After suffering a loss in the arena, they naturally had to get back at her in the wine field. They sat on the chairs and placed the wine bottles on the table. They pushed the wine bottles out and took a sip. Then, they sat on the chairs and placed the wine bottles on the table. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he laughed out loud, ha ha ha. Indeed, you are a good person. After saying this, they looked back at each other. At this moment, Ji-yu slowly took a sip of wine and filled the table with food from her storage ring. Seeing Ji-yu's culinary skills, they pounced on the table and continuously picked up the food on the table. It was a bowl of spicy noodles and a golden lamb. The aroma wafted out and entered the other party's nose. Duan Hong did not expect such fragrant food to exist. He walked forward and cut off a piece of lamb. After taking a bite of the lamb, he turned around and said faintly, "Good, good. This old man only knows how to eat mystical beasts." It seems that it was all in vain. It seems that even ordinary food can be so outstanding. After eating, they returned to their respective camps. Outside Ji-yu's door, a gentle figure walked in. She held a basin and placed the white cloth in the basin. After moving it around, she directly twisted the cloth clean and wiped Ji-yu's entire body clean. Although Ji-yu was powerful, he didn't use his mystical energy to force the alcohol out of his body. The smell of alcohol on his body instantly increased. When she turned around, the servant girl placed another basin on the ground and placed Ji-yu's legs in the basin. Ji-yu felt the warmth between his legs. He immediately opened his eyes and saw that there was another servant girl in front of him. She was squatting in front of Ji-yu. Ji-yu understood that this was the servant girl sent by the military camp to take care of him. He took out a small cloth from his pocket and wiped his dirty little face. He frowned. He then said indifferently, "This won't do, this won't do. Hurry up and take a bath." The servant girl was stunned. No one had ever put the cloth on his face. Ji-yu said indifferently, "Come over here." He turned around and pushed her into the tent, which was originally prepared for Ji-yu. He directly soaked her in the wooden tub. The servant girl seemed very shy. At the same time, she looked in Ji-yu's direction with a trace of expectation. Unexpectedly, Ji-yu turned around and walked out. After Ji-yu took a few steps, he sat on the chair and widened his eyes. After a while, Ji-yu said indifferently, "Come in." There were 6 men standing outside the door. After hearing this, they all walked in and cupped their hands to Ji-yu. Ji-yu said indifferently, "What are your names and positions?" "I'm Zhong Yi. I'm the instructor's assistant. General's daily life will be taken care of by First Miss and me. I'm Zhong Er. I'm the commanding officer. They are all my subordinates." Ji-yu nodded. Ji-yu didn't need to know the people behind him. He gave the order and they flew up and charged in Ji-yu's direction. He turned around and swung his sword down heavily, which was accompanied by a loud bang. At this moment, the sound of the explosion covered the sky. There seemed to be a flame in the sky. After calculating both sides, Ji-yu gave the order for everyone to gather. At this moment, many people gradually walked out and gathered in the middle of the square. Ji-yu walked to the stage and said slowly, "Let me see what you're capable of first." Normally, even with this level of military formation, after a moment, a loud sound came out. They slowly walked forward and at this moment, they shouted at the same time. Roar! Countless spears were brandished. As the spears were brandished, innumerable mystic rays burst out. The spears exploded on the stone wall. Suddenly, the stone wall shattered and the stones were all sent flying. They looked energetic. Ji-yu said indifferently, "Ha ha ha, you're not bad. But it's not good enough." The soldiers were not convinced. They didn't know what they did wrong. If they were judged by their individual bravery, they were not weak. But they were not weak. They still had to consider the combination of their mystical skills. Ji-yu seemed to know what they were thinking and said indifferently, "The military formation can be changed even better." Chapter 704. After Ji finished speaking, a smile appeared on the faces of the soldiers. They looked at each other. They could not believe who they were. After looking at each other, they stood rooted to the ground and waited for Ji to continue. Ji took out a long spear. They brandished the spear, and it exploded with a bang. A loud boom was heard. The sound of the explosion was heard. He said calmly, "Left and right guards, charge towards the shooting range. Middle guards, gather your mystical skills." He suddenly turned around and took 2 steps forward. After seeing the group of people coming forward, Ji said calmly, "Those in front, fire." After receiving Ji's order, the guards on the left and right moved at the same time. Following a loud explosion, that enormous explosive power directly bombarded the stone. Right at that moment, it collided with the stone, causing it to shatter. Suddenly, the rock fragments flew out and hit the side. In an instant, they flew forward and ran. When they saw the puppets turn into powder, they turned around. They turned around and jumped on top of him. They directly flew up and ran forward. The group of people in the middle chopped down their axes one after another. Countless axes smashed those puppets into pieces. Unbelievable. After using this array, there is actually such a powerful boost. I can't believe it. After they finished speaking, they turned around and slowly walked forward. From his bosom, he took out the formation Shen skill that he had obtained in the Shen gate. Because in front of them, at this moment, the surrounding troops walked forward one after another. In their eyes, there seemed to be a wave of Shen energy gathering in their hands at this moment. The mystical energy in their hands was emitting light. Ji turned around and said calmly, "As long as you patiently study this mystical skill, you will be able to form it in a short period of time." At this moment, he turned around and left with Zhong 1 and Zhong 2. They had never seen such an instructor. He was so confident. They admired such a general even more. Where could they find such a general with such personality? They couldn't find it anywhere. Proud expressions appeared in their hearts. He directly walked forward, and an explosive sound rang out in front of him. At this moment, flames spread out. If those puppets were ordinary Shen cultivators, they could only be turned into ashes. They turned around and took a step forward. He turned around and a ray of mystical light suddenly appeared. That ray of mystical light exploded on the ground. They had only practiced according to the scroll that Ji gave them, and they were able to have such explosive power. If they learned it, the small Star Soul Palace would disappear from the spot in an instant. At this moment, they ran forward quickly. He extended those spears forward and swung them out. Countless spears appeared from the spear and landed heavily on the stone wall. Ji left the stage and walked up. They sat on the chairs and in the blink of an eye, they turned around and walked forward. As for the rest of the group, they turned around and saw someone walking out from a different direction, holding a treasured item in their hands. The eldest maid came forward with a basin. She placed the basin on the table, and her face immediately turned red. He said calmly, "Thank you. What a good teapot." He took the teapot in the basin and drank. After tasting a mouthful, he said comfortably that it was good tea. He stood up and walked out of the door. He walked straight out. At this moment, the door in front of him opened. The people in the military camp were supposed to live in the camp, but Ji was an instructor. She was allowed to go to and from work as if it was a normal job. He walked out of the military camp. A servant walked out from the side and clasped his hands at Ji. Ji said calmly, "You are? I am the housekeeper of the Huang family. Our family head invites you to have some tea." After saying this, Ji sat in the carriage under the servant's guidance. The carriage started moving and sped towards another direction. The faces of the people on the street instantly changed when they saw the speeding carriage. Many peddlers fell to the ground with a thud. At this moment, they seemed to be hiding from Ji and watching quietly. Ji sat in the carriage and came to the other side of the street. Ji walked out and looked up at this moment. Many people walked out from both sides with fear in their eyes. "Well, housekeeper, please slow down." The housekeeper immediately pulled the reins. At this moment, the carriage slowly came to a stop. A person's head popped out and said calmly, "Isn't this the teacher? Teacher is here. Let's welcome her warmly." She didn't know the background of this family, but from their attitude, it seemed that they wanted to build a relationship with Ji-yu. Ji-yu walked through the door. At this moment, the people inside the door walked out. They clasped their hands and said to Ji-yu, "Greetings, teacher." A young man walked out with a smile. He was actually a fatty. It seemed that he was the master of this family. He said faintly, "You must be the teacher, right?" Ji-yu nodded. After smiling, he slowly walked forward and said calmly, "Greetings, young master." After saying this, he introduced himself. "This humble one is Huang Xiaofang, 4th level of the human profound realm." Even in this place where experts were as common as clouds, Huang Xiaofang had reached the 4th level of the human profound realm at such a young age. Along with a ray of light, he fell heavily and exploded on the ground, followed by a bright flash of light. Ji-yu stood up and disappeared in the blink of an eye. This was the rule before two great clans wanted to befriend each other. As long as two people wanted to befriend each other, they had to go through a test of strength. They set their sights on Ji-yu. Ji-yu turned around and said calmly, "Greetings, young masters. What do you think of this humble one's strength?" After hearing Ji-yu's words, they turned around and said calmly, "Ha ha ha, young master is really amazing. Quickly, invite him to eat." After seeing Ji-yu's strength, Huang Xiaofang immediately invited Ji-yu in. Everyone sat at the table. Ji-yu didn't act like an expert. She directly picked up the food in front of her and started eating without restraint. When the rest of the people saw this, they all looked at her with approval. Looking at Ji-yu, they suddenly laughed out loud. After laughing, Huang Xiaofang said, "I heard that you have a lot of fans in the army. I wonder if the army is still lacking in weapons? We have merchants here who are in charge of forging weapons, providing magnetite, and people you need." After saying this, Ji-yu stepped forward and said calmly, "Do you think you need to go through me to get through the military channel?" After hearing Ji-yu's words, Ji-yu stood up and walked out of the door. "Young Master Xiaofang, please don't worry." The other party suddenly laughed and cupped their hands. "Young master, take care." After saying this, Ji-yu picked up the bag beside him and walked out of the door. He sat in the carriage. It seemed that he also needed to buy a mansion here. At this moment, the carriage arrived in front of a door. This was the trading company in Star North City. They got off the carriage and walked to the ground. They cupped their hands and said to Ji-yu, who was in front of them, "Ladies and gentlemen, I plan to buy a mansion here." After hearing that Ji-yu wanted to buy a mansion, their eyes widened. They walked up to Ji-yu and said with a smile, "Young master, how big are you looking for?" "About 3 sections of a courtyard." 3 sections of a courtyard, her. He sucked in a breath of cold air. Good Lord, this was a big deal. There is one. The former is a human profound realm supremacy, but he seems to only accept magnetite. He needs more than 80,000 magnetite, but he doesn't want middle or low-grade magnetite. "Young master, what do you think?" Before coming here, Ji-yu had brought back a lot of magnetite from the southern region. After receiving these magnetite, Ji-yu's palm flashed and a treasure bag appeared in an instant. Ji-yu threw the treasure bag out. After receiving Ji-yu's treasure pouch, the golden-toothed man wasn't in a hurry. It was impossible to judge just based on the weight. Usually, people like Ji-yu who could afford to spend money would definitely be rich. Furthermore, she was a profound realm cultivator. Since she was a profound realm cultivator, the bag in her hand couldn't be used by ordinary people. He handed the bag to a servant. The servant placed it in a golden basin on the table. There seemed to be a string of numbers on the golden basin. He blinked at the golden-toothed man. Ji-yu nodded, then took 2 steps forward and sat on the chair. He said indifferently, "Young master, how many people do you have in your family?" Ji-yu shook his head, "Just me, and maybe a little girl." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.